After draining the cup of tea my son had brewed for me, my whole body went numb and I collapsed onto the sofa. I was completely unable to move, not even a finger. In the middle of the night, I heard slow, heavy footsteps approaching. I lay still in the darkness, holding my breath as I listened to them whispering beside me. Make it look natural. We have to silence him until the day of the trial. What happened next has haunted me since then. Thank you for being here with me. Before we dive in, leave a quick comment. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a family betrayal? Just yes or no is fine. Your answer might be exactly what someone else reading needs today. Quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling, but the core message is what matters most. 20 minutes after drinking the tea my son made me, I felt the tingling in my legs. At 67, I thought I knew my body. 20 years fixing ship engines in the Navy taught you to read systems, hydraulic pressure, electrical current, the difference between normal wear and catastrophic failure. So another 20 years running my mechanical workshop in Waco only sharpened that instinct. But sitting in Clayton's Houston living room that Monday night in October, exhausted from 3 weeks of unpacking boxes and settling into his house, I didn't recognize the warning signs in my own body. Clayton had appeared in the doorway at 9 o'clock, carrying a steaming mug, still wearing his business suit despite the late hour. At 42, my son had become the image of success. I'd raised him to be sharp-polished, always in control. "Dad, you look exhausted," he said, setting the mug on the coffee table in front of me. "I made you chamomile tea. It'll help you sleep." I looked up surprised. Clayton wasn't the type to make tea. In the 3 weeks since Eleanor died, and I'd moved from Waco to stay with him, he'd barely been home. Always working, always busy. The gesture caught me off guard. "That's thoughtful, son. Thank you." He smiled, brief practiced. "Just rest. You've been working too hard at your age." The tea smelled floral, slightly sweet. I lifted the mug and drank, grateful for the warmth. Clayton watched me drain the entire cup before he nodded and disappeared upstairs. I heard his bedroom door close, followed by silence. I set the empty mug down and leaned back against the leather couch, letting my eyes drift shut. 3 weeks of grief sat heavy on my chest. Eleanor's funeral, selling the Waco house, packing 40 years of life into boxes. Moving in with Clayton had seemed practical. What else was I going to do at 67 alone? Then the tingling started, my feet first. A pins and needles sensation like they had fallen asleep, except I hadn't been sitting on them. I flexed my toes inside my boots, trying to shake it off. The tingling spread to my ankles, my calves. I tried to stand. My legs buckled. I collapsed back onto the couch, hands gripping the armrest. The leather felt slippery under my palms, no weight. My hands were going numb. I looked down at my fingers. They moved when I commanded them, but sluggish, clumsy, like I was wearing thick gloves. "Clayton," I called out. The word came out weak, barely a rasp. I tried again. "Help!" My tongue felt thick. My jaw wouldn't cooperate. The sound died in my throat. My heart started hammering. 20 years in the Navy, I'd seen men panic in emergencies, flooded engine rooms, electrical fires, trapped spaces. Panic killed you faster than the crisis. I forced myself to breathe slowly, assess the situation, identify the problem, what was happening to me. The numbness climbed my thighs, my chest. My arms hung useless at my sides, now fingers twitching, but unable to grip anything. I tried to push myself upright, but my body wouldn't respond. It was like the connection between my brain and my muscles had been severed. Thoughts firing signals sent, nothing received. Stroke. The word flashed through my mind. But I'd always been healthy. Never smoked, barely drank, worked with my hands my whole life. No family history. And strokes didn't feel like this, did they? This was too symmetrical, too complete. I managed to turn my head slightly, just enough to see the clock on the wall. 9:45, 15 minutes since I'd finished the tea. My breathing came shallow, now labored. Each breath took effort, like learning the mechanics all over again. In, out, in, out. I focused on that rhythm, the only thing I could still control. By 10 o'clock, I couldn't move my head anymore. By 10:30, I couldn't blink properly. By 11, I couldn't move at all. My body had become a cage. My mind screamed commands: move, your hand, turn your head, call for help, and nothing happened. Nothing. I lay there on Clayton's couch, staring at the ceiling, completely paralyzed, while my brain stayed terrifyingly alert. The house was silent except for the refrigerator's hum from the kitchen, my own shallow breathing, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape the prison my body had become. I drew on everything the Navy taught me. Engine room, flooded watertight door, jammed. You don't panic. You observe. You listen. You wait for the opening. So, I observed. The ceiling had a small water stain in the corner. The couch smelled like leather conditioner. My left boot had come untied. At some point I could see the lace dangling in my peripheral vision, but I couldn't look down to confirm it. I listened. No footsteps upstairs. Clayton's bedroom door hadn't opened. The house settled around me, creaking slightly as the October night cooled. A car drove past outside. Then silence again. A mechanic's instinct doesn't leave you even when your body does. When something stops working, there's always a cause. Systems don't fail randomly. There's always a reason: a blown seal, a severed wire, a contaminated fuel line. I thought about the tea, the uncharacteristic kindness, the way Clayton had watched me drink the entire cup. This isn't natural. The thought crystallized slowly, each word forming with terrible clarity in my paralyzed mind. This wasn't a stroke. This wasn't a medical emergency. Something had been done to me. Someone had done this to me. I lay there in complete darkness. Now the lights had been off when I collapsed, and I couldn't reach the switch. Staring at a ceiling I could no longer see clearly. My body was a prison, and I was the only inmate. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even close my eyes properly to escape into sleep. All I could do was breathe shallow, labored breaths that took every ounce of concentration and listen to my heart hammering in my chest like it was counting down the seconds until morning. I had no idea what was coming next, but I would hear every word of it. The front door opened at 2 a.m. I heard it before I saw anything. The click of the lock, the whisper of hinges, footsteps on hardwood. My eyes were still open, staring at the ceiling in darkness. 5 hours paralyzed, and now someone was entering the house. The living room lamp switched on. Light flooded my vision. I couldn't turn my head, but I heard Clayton's voice, low and urgent. "He's on the couch. Just check him quickly." A man appeared above me, 50s gray hair, dark coat over business casual. Dr. Ian Blackwell, a private physician with a detached professional manner, didn't introduce himself, didn't speak to me at all. He pressed 2 cold fingers against my throat, checking my pulse. I tried to speak. My tongue wouldn't move. He pulled a penlight from his pocket and shone it in my eyes. Right. Left. The light burned, but I couldn't flinch. He placed his palm over my chest, counted my breaths. Vitals stable. He said to Clayton, not me. Paralysis is complete, but temporary. Should wear off gradually over 12 to 18 hours. Clayton stepped closer. Just make it look natural. He can't move before Friday. The doctor packed his penlight. I didn't come here. We never had this conversation. Understood. I need him silent at the guardianship hearing, Clayton said. Guardianship hearing. Friday. The words hit like a blow. My son was planning to declare me incompetent, take control of everything Eleanor and I had built over 40 years, and he'd poison me to do it. Rage exploded in my chest with nowhere to go. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, couldn't even clench my fists. I just lay there listening to my son discuss keeping me paralyzed for 72 hours. The doctor left. Clayton turned off the lamp and went upstairs. His bedroom door closed. Silence. I was alone with the knowledge that this wasn't an accident. Clayton had done this, intentionally poisoned me, called a private doctor, planned to use my paralysis to steal my life in court. How long had my son been planning this? I thought about Eleanor. She died 3 weeks ago, cancer consuming her in 6 months. But 2 years before she got sick, sitting on our Waco porch, she'd said something I'd brushed off. That Vernon, someone sees you as an obstacle. I'd laughed, asked who could possibly see a 65-year-old mechanic as an obstacle. She hadn't laughed, just looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. Promise me you'll be careful. She'd meant Clayton, our own son. She'd known somehow and tried to warn me. The hours crawled past. I lay in darkness, unable to move or sleep. My mind racing through 42 years of fatherhood, trying to find when my son had decided I was worth more controlled than free. Every baseball game I'd attended. Every late-night call when he needed advice. Every dollar we'd saved to help him start his business. When had I stopped being his father and started being his obstacle? Dawn light crept through the windows. Birds sang outside. The house woke around me, pipes creaking, refrigerator, humming sounds of a normal Tuesday morning that was anything but normal. At 6 o'clock, a car pulled into the driveway. A key turned in the lock. Different footsteps, lighter, quicker. Celeste Garrett came into the living room and stopped dead. Clayton's wife, 37, worked nights as a nurse at Houston Methodist. She stood there in her scrubs, staring at me sprawled on the couch, face going white. Oh my God, Vernon? She rushed over, knelt beside me, pressed warm, shaking fingers to my neck, checking for a pulse. Clayton, she shouted toward the stairs. Clayton, get down here. Your father, he's not moving. Clayton's bedroom door opened. Footsteps on the stairs, unhurried, calm. Celeste already had her phone out. I'm calling 911. Oh, ew. The police station bay costs. No. Clayton's hand closed over hers, gently taking the phone. Don't. She stared at him. What Clayton, he needs help. He just fell. Probably got dizzy blood pressure. His voice was soothing, reasonable. Calling 911 now will postpone Friday's court hearing. We need that guardianship order to get him into a proper care facility. You know he can't keep living alone at his age. Celeste looked from Clayton to me and back. I could see the conflict on her face, medical training, screaming to call for help, trust in her husband pulling the other way. I just let him rest, Clayton said. We'll check on him after work. If he's not better by tonight, we'll take him to the ER ourselves. Celeste hesitated, then nodded. She set her phone on the table. Clayton took her arm, guided her toward the door. They left together. The deadbolt turned from outside. Locked in, imprisoned in my own body in my son's house. I lay there as morning sun crept across the floor. 7 o'clock, 7:15. The house silent except for my breathing, 7:30. I focused everything I had on my left hand. Every ounce of will, every spark of rage, every memory of 20 years fixing broken engines everyone else said couldn't be fixed. Move, just move. My left index finger twitched, small, weak, barely visible. But mine. I did it again. The finger moved, then the middle finger. A tremor ran through my hand. The drug was wearing off. The doctor had said 12 to 18 hours. I'd been down for nearly 11. By 9:15, I could move my arms. The tingling that had started in my left finger spread through my hands up my wrists into my forearms. I flexed my right hand, stiff clumsy, but responding. My shoulders ached when I tried to lift them, muscles screaming after hours of paralysis, but they moved. I curled my fingers into fists, released, again. The movements felt foreign like operating machinery with rust in the gears, but I was getting control back. My legs were weaker. When I shifted my weight on the couch, my thighs trembled and my feet barely responded, but I could feel them now. The drug was wearing off faster than the doctor had promised. 9:20. Clayton and Celeste had left at 7. They wouldn't be back until after 5. I had maybe 8 hours, maybe less if Clayton came home during lunch. I couldn't afford to wait. I rolled off the couch onto the floor. The impact sent pain shooting through my shoulder, but I bit down on it. 20 years in the Navy, fixing engines in cramped spaces, taught you how to move when movement seemed impossible. You used your core, your upper body. You didn't panic. I crawled across the living room toward the window. My legs dragged behind me half-dead weight, but my arms had strength left from 40 years of workshop labor. Pull, breathe, pull, breathe. The distance from couch to window was maybe 15 feet. It felt like a mile. When I reached the window, I gripped the sill and pulled myself up. My legs buckled, but held just enough to keep me semi-upright. I pressed my palms against the frame and pushed. It slid up. Unlocked, I stared at the open window, barely comprehending. Clayton had locked the front door from outside, locked me in like a prisoner, but he'd forgotten the window, or assumed I'd be too paralyzed to reach it. Or maybe, and this thought hit me hard, he'd gotten sloppy, overconfident. His mistake. I gripped the frame with both hands and started lowering myself through. The opening was narrow, but I was lean, always had been. My upper body strength held as I let my weight shift outside legs dangling in empty air. For a moment I hung there, arms trembling, looking down at grass 8 feet below. 20 years ago, I could have done this drop easy. At 67, with legs still half numb from poison, it was going to hurt. I let go. The fall felt longer than it was. I hit the grass-hard knees, buckling, and rolled onto my side. Pain shot through both legs, but nothing cracked. Nothing broke. I lay there in damp morning grass, catching my breath, smelling dirt and October air and freedom. I stood. Slowly. My legs shook like a newborn calf's, but they held. I moved along the side of the house toward the garage, one hand on the siding for balance. Each step felt steadier than the last. The drug was still wearing off nerves, reconnecting muscles, remembering how to work. I'd taught my son to be careful to plan ahead, to keep spare keys where you could find them in an emergency, never imagining his emergency would be escaping from me. The side door to the garage was unlocked. I pushed through and saw Clayton's truck parked in the dim space, same Ford F-15. Oh, I'd helped him buy 3 years ago when his credit was maxed. I'd co-signed the loan, trusted him. My eyes went to the wall beside the door. There it was, an old brass hook tarnished green with age, with a single truck key hanging on it, the spare key. Exactly where I'd taught him to keep it 30 years ago, when he was 12. Always keep a spare key on the hook, son, I'd told him. Always. You never know when you'll need it. The habit that once meant safety now meant escape. I grabbed the key, and as I did, I saw Clayton's jacket draped over the chair. Dark blue windbreaker. I checked the pockets, maybe he'd left his phone something I could use. No phone. But there was a business card. I pulled it out. Heavy cardstock professional. The front read, Noel Chambers Private Investigations, with a Houston phone number and address. I flipped it over. Clayton's handwriting covered the back. That distinctive slanted script, I recognized instantly the same careful penmanship I'd taught him when he was 7 years old, sitting at our kitchen table practicing his name over and over until the letters flowed smooth. 4 words in black ink, find evidence of senile old man. I read it once, twice, 3 times. Not help my father, not evaluate my father's health. Find evidence. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't Clayton panicking about an aging father who couldn't care for himself. This was calculated, premeditated. He'd hired a private investigator to manufacture evidence of senility, to build a case for guardianship, to make me look incompetent so he could take control of everything Eleanor and I had built over 40 years. How long had he been planning this? Weeks, months? I slid the card into my pocket and climbed into the truck. The key turned. The engine roared to life loud in the enclosed garage. I hit the garage door opener and backed out into the Houston morning sun. In the rearview mirror, I saw Clayton's house growing smaller. The house where he'd poisoned me, paralyzed me, locked me in. The house where my son had become someone I didn't recognize. I didn't look back again. I had one destination, Waco, and one person who might still help me. 3 hours of highway stretched between Houston and home, and Eleanor wasn't there to fill the silence. She used to sit in the passenger seat on this drive back when we'd visit Clayton in Houston, maybe twice a year. She'd sing along to country radio, point out wildflowers blooming along the roadside, tell me stories about students she'd taught at Waco Elementary before retiring. Her voice filled the truck cab the way sunlight filled the Texas plains. Now just silence, empty seat. October wind whistling through the cracked window because I needed to feel something besides the numbness still fading from my legs. My hands shook on the wheel. 3 hours since I'd escaped through Clayton's window, and I still couldn't make them steady. The drug was mostly gone. I could feel my feet on the pedals, could grip the steering wheel, could work the turn signals. But the tremor remained. Maybe it wasn't the drug anymore. Maybe it was rage. I kept seeing that business card, Clayton's handwriting. Find evidence of senile old man. How long had he been planning this? While Eleanor was dying in hospice, had he been meeting with private investigators? While I was packing up our Waco house after her funeral, had he been researching guardianship laws? While I was grieving alone in that empty house, had he been plotting how to steal everything we'd built? The highway stretched flat and endless. I-45 South, the same route Eleanor and I had driven 100 times over 40 years. Waco to Houston. Houston to Waco. Taking Clayton to college. Visiting for holidays. Helping him move into new apartments. New houses always moving up. Always ambitious, my son. Eleanor used to say that with pride in her voice. Now I heard the warning underneath. I'd replayed that porch conversation 100 times since escaping through Clayton's window. Each time it landed differently. The first time I'd heard her words as worry. Now I heard them as a diagnosis. Eleanor had named the threat 2 years before it struck, and I'd smiled and patted her hand and told her she was overthinking. She hadn't answered, just looked at me with those sad knowing eyes and made me promise to be careful. I'd assumed she meant Celeste, Clayton's wife. Maybe Eleanor had picked up on tension. I'd missed some rivalry between daughter-in-law and father-in-law over Clayton's attention. It made sense at the time. Eleanor had always seen people more clearly than I did. 20 years of marriage taught me that much. But she hadn't meant Celeste. She'd meant Clayton, our own son. The realization hit me somewhere around Huntsville, passing the prison towers, rising from the flatlands. Eleanor had known. Somehow she'd known that Clayton saw me as something to be removed, controlled, managed. She'd tried to warn me, and I'd been too blind to understand. What else had she known? What else had she seen that I'd missed? I remembered something else, a tin box Eleanor kept under our bed in the Waco house. Old metal painted blue, rusted at the corners. She'd kept letters in it, important documents, things she wanted to preserve. I'd packed it when I moved to Houston, brought it with me. It was probably still in Clayton's guest room, where I'd been staying mixed in with the boxes I'd never finished unpacking. I needed that box. Whatever Eleanor had saved, whatever warnings she'd left, I needed them. But going back to Houston meant walking into Clayton's trap. Friday was 3 days away. The guardianship hearing. If I showed up paralyzed and incoherent, I'd lose everything. If I didn't show up, he'd probably win by default. I had to fight back, but I couldn't do it alone. Waco appeared on the horizon at 12:15, familiar skyline, familiar streets. The town where I'd raised my son and buried my wife and built a life that was supposed to mean something. I drove past our old house, sold now to a young couple with kids. Past the workshop I'd closed after Eleanor died. Past the elementary school where she'd taught second grade for 25 years. I pulled up in front of Lester Whitfield's house. Lester, 65. A retired history teacher who'd lived next door for 20 years, opened his front door before I could knock. He took one look at me, still wearing the clothes I'd slept in, hair uncombed, face probably pale from hours of poison working through my system, and his eyes widened. He didn't ask questions, just stepped aside. "Let's come in," he said. "Coffee's hot." I walked into the familiar living room. Same brown couch Eleanor and I had helped him move in 15 years ago. Same bookshelf overflowing with history texts and Civil War biographies. Same smell of coffee and old books. "You look like hell, Vernon. Sit down." I sat at his kitchen table. Lester poured 2 mugs of coffee black and sat across from me. He waited. Trust when you've been betrayed by your own blood feels like walking on a frozen lake, testing each step before putting weight down. But Lester had been our neighbor for 20 years, had helped us move furniture, had brought casseroles after Eleanor's funeral, had never asked for anything, never wanted anything except friendship. I told him everything. The tea, the paralysis, the doctor checking my vitals at 2 in the morning, Clayton's whispered conspiracy about the guardianship hearing, Celeste finding me and being stopped from calling for help, my escape through the window, the business card with Clayton's handwriting, find evidence of senile old man, 45 minutes of talking. Lester listened without interrupting, without doubt. Without that look people give you when they think you're losing your mind. When I finished, he looked at his coffee cup for a long moment. Then he looked me straight in the eye. "I believe you," he said, simple, certain, every word. The relief nearly broke me. Lester set down his coffee cup and leaned forward. "Eleanor once asked me to keep a secret," he said quietly. "I think it's time to tell you." The kitchen clock ticked. I waited. Eleanor had seen it coming 3 months before she died. She called me 3 days before the final hospitalization. Lester said both hands wrapped around his coffee mug like he needed the warmth. Said she saw a man watching your house, taking photographs. I stared at him. What? Her body was failing, but her mind was sharp as ever. She told me, "Someone's watching Vernon, taking pictures. I need you to remember this, Lester. If anything happens to me, you tell him." The kitchen felt too small suddenly, too quiet. "Why didn't you tell me then?" "Because 3 days later, she was in the hospital. 2 weeks later, she was gone." Lester looked down at his coffee. "And you were drowning in grief. I thought hell, Vernon. I thought maybe the cancer medication had made her paranoid, that she'd seen things that weren't there. But they were there." I pulled out the business card, set it on the table between us. Noel Chambers Private Investigations. Clayton's handwriting on the back. Lester picked up the card, read it, set it down carefully. "She knew, months ago, she knew Clayton was building a case against you. My wife had been fighting a war I didn't even know existed, and she'd been fighting it alone. I need to talk to this detective," I said. Lester pushed the kitchen phone across the table. I dialed the number on the card. 2 rings. 3. "Chambers." The voice was measured professional, a private investigator who'd clearly learned not to give anything away in the first 30 seconds of a call. "My name is Vernon Garrett," I said. "We need to talk now." Silence on the other end. Long enough that I thought he might hang up. "How did you—" He stopped, started again. "Your son said you were incapacitated. My son lied. I found your business card with his handwriting on the back. Find evidence of senile old man. Ring any bells? Oh, another pause. I could hear him breathing, thinking, calculating. "Where did you get that card?" he asked finally. "From his jacket, after he poisoned me and left me paralyzed on his couch." The silence stretched longer this time. When Noel spoke again, his voice had changed, less professional, more wary. "Poisoned. Arsenic or something close to it. Temporary paralysis. Long enough to keep me quiet for a guardianship hearing set for Friday. You were hired to manufacture evidence that I'm senile. I want to know what you found, what you told him, and what you're planning to testify." "I don't—" He stopped. I heard papers rustling. "Mr. Garrett, I think we should talk in person." "That's what I just said." "I'll be in Waco in 1 hour." He hung up. I set the phone down. My hands were shaking again, but this time not from the drug, from rage. From knowing that while Eleanor was dying, while I was holding her hand in hospice, Clayton had been hiring investigators to destroy my reputation. "We need to go to the house," I said. Lester looked at me. "Your old house." Eleanor kept a tin box under our bed, important papers, letters. If she knew about the surveillance, she might have left something, evidence, warnings, anything I can use. We drove to the house I'd sold a month ago. The new buyers hadn't moved in yet. Still empty windows, dark grass, already getting long. I still had a key. The realtor had asked for it back, but I'd kept putting it off. Now I understood why. Part of me had known I wasn't done with this place. We walked through the front door into 40 years of memories stripped bare. No furniture, no pictures on the walls, just empty rooms and dust motes floating in afternoon light. I went straight to the bedroom, our bedroom, where Eleanor and I had slept for 4 decades, where we talked about dreams and argued about money and made plans for retirement we'd never get to live. I knelt beside the bed frame the new owners had left behind, too old to move. They'd said they'd replace it. I reached underneath fingers, searching the familiar space where Eleanor had kept her tin box for as long as I could remember. Empty. I stretched further arm, extended full length, searching every corner. Nothing. "It's gone," I said. The words came out hollow. "He took it." Lester knelt beside me. "Clayton, who else?" I sat back on my heels, defeat washing over me. "He must have come here after Eleanor died. Took the box, destroyed whatever evidence she'd saved." The empty space under the bed felt like losing her all over again. "Maybe I am losing my mind," I said quietly. "Maybe I imagined the box. Maybe Clayton's right, and I can't trust my own memory anymore." "Vernon," Lester's voice was quiet but firm. "Look at me." I looked. Eleanor didn't just have one box. I stared at him. "What?" "The night before the ambulance came, her last night here, I was checking on her like I'd been doing every evening. Around 10 o'clock, I saw her from my window. She was in your backyard, alone, carrying a small shovel. A shovel. I almost went over to help her, but something stopped me. The way she moved, purposeful, determined, like she didn't want company. I watched from my window." He paused. "She went to the maple tree, Vernon. The maple tree Eleanor had planted on our 10th anniversary. 37 years ago, she dug the hole herself, insisted on doing it without help. Said she wanted to plant something that would outlive us both. You think she buried something?" I watched her dig for 20 minutes. Then she came back inside without the shovel. Next morning, the ambulance took her to the hospital. She never came home. Hope ignited in my chest, fragile as a match flame. Lester stood, offered me his hand. I took it, let him pull me to my feet. We walked through the empty house toward the back door. Lester opened it. Afternoon, Texas sun poured into the dusty hallway, harsh and bright. Through the doorway, I could see the backyard overgrown, now unmowed for weeks. And there at the far edge of the property line stood the maple tree, taller than I remembered, wider, 37 years of growth. Eleanor had been there just weeks before she died, alone in the dark with a shovel burying something she didn't want Clayton to find. Yeah, I followed Lester into the backyard. Whatever Eleanor had buried was still waiting. The Texas soil was hard as concrete. Lester retrieved a shovel from the garage, probably the same one Eleanor had used that last night. He stood beneath the maple tree eyes, scanning the ground, then pointed to a spot about 3 feet from the trunk. "Right here," he said. I watched from my bedroom window. She was kneeling right here. I took the shovel. The maple tree towered above us, 37 years of growth since Eleanor planted it on our 10th anniversary. Back then, it had been just a sapling thin as my wrist. We'd been young, broke, nothing but a mortgage and a dream. Now that sapling was taller than our house had ever been, and Eleanor was gone. I drove the shovel into the ground. The blade barely penetrated October, had baked the soil hard. I put my weight behind it, used my boot to force it deeper. The impact jarred through my spine. Again and again. Lester offered to take a turn, but I shook my head. This was mine to do. Eleanor had done this alone, dying weak from months of cancer eating through her. If she could dig in that condition, I could finish what she started. 30 minutes of brutal work. The afternoon sun beat down on my neck. Sweat soaked through my shirt. My mechanic's hands calloused from 40 years of workshop labor, started to blister. But I kept digging. 2 feet down, then 2.5. The shovel hit something solid. The sound was distinctive metal on metal, a sharp clang that echoed different from the dull thud of blade striking rock. "I hit something," I said, my heart hammered against my ribs. I dropped to my knees, set the shovel aside, started clearing dirt with my hands. My fingers found edges, something rectangular, wrapped in plastic. I dug around it carefully, afraid to damage whatever Eleanor had left me. I pulled it free. A sealed plastic bag covered in dirt but intact. Inside, I could see a tin box smaller than the one that used to sit under our bed but similar, blue paint, rusted corners. And on the lid in Eleanor's careful handwriting, written in permanent marker, "For Vernon, if you need this, I'm sorry I couldn't stop him." "Eleanor," I whispered. "Oh, Eleanor." She knew Vernon. Lester's voice was quiet. She knew what he'd do. Eleanor planted this tree when we had nothing but a mortgage and a dream. Now it held the only thing she had left to give me the truth. I carried the bag to the old stone steps at the edge of the yard, the same steps where Eleanor and I used to sit on summer evenings watching the sun go down, talking about nothing and everything. I sat there now with Lester beside me. My hands shook as I tore open the plastic seal. Inside the tin box was a letter folded carefully, my name written on the outside in Eleanor's handwriting. Beneath it, a small sealed envelope. I opened the letter first. "My dear Vernon," it began. "If you're reading this, it means Clayton has taken the first box from under our bed. I'm sorry I had to hide this from you, but I knew you wouldn't believe me if I told you while I was alive. You always saw the best in our son. It's one of the things I love most about you." My vision blurred. I blinked hard, kept reading. "Clayton is in debt, serious debt. He's asked me to borrow from your pension many times over the past 2 years. I've refused every time. When I'm gone, he'll find another way to get that money. Be careful. Watch the bank accounts. Watch the mail. And remember the steel bracelet you forged for his college graduation. I've left you something that might help." The letter was dated 2 weeks before she'd gone into the hospital for the last time. 2 weeks before, I'd held her hand and watched her slip away. He asked to borrow money. I looked at Lester. She never told me. "She was protecting you," Lester said quietly. "Even dying, she was protecting you. A mother's love for her son, even a son who'd grown into a stranger, dies hard. Eleanor had known what Clayton was becoming, had seen it long before I did, and still she'd tried to shield both of us. Shield me from the truth. Shield Clayton from my anger. But in the end, she'd chosen me. I set the letter down carefully and picked up the small envelope. It was sealed with tape protected against moisture. I tore it open. Inside was a photograph. I pulled it out, held it up to the fading afternoon light. A steel bracelet, close-up shot, every detail sharp and clear. The distinctive hand-welded seams I'd spent hours perfecting in my workshop 20 years ago. The slight imperfection on the left side, where I'd had to redo a weld. The custom clasp I designed myself. Clayton's college graduation gift. I'd forged it from scratch, spent weeks on it, wanted to give him something that would last. Something made with my own hands. Why did she photograph his bracelets? I asked. "I made this," I said more to myself than to Lester, "in my workshop, for his graduation. He wore it every day for years." She was preparing for something, Vernon, Lester said. She saw it coming. But how Eleanor had photographed this bracelet carefully documented every weld mark, every detail, like evidence in a case file. Like she knew someday I'd need to prove I'd made it, need to identify it. But identify it where, in what context? She'd been dead 3 weeks. How could she have known Clayton would need this bracelet identified? What did a 20-year-old graduation gift have to do with guardianship hearings and poison tea and stolen money? I stared at the photograph, at the bracelet I had made, with my own hands, at the evidence my wife had left me, without explaining why. Eleanor had been building a case against our son before she even knew what crime he would commit. Then I heard a car pull into Lester's driveway next door. The man stepping out of the gray sedan wasn't expecting me to be standing upright. Lester and I walked from my backyard through the side gate to his driveway as the car pulled in. I still held Eleanor's letter in one hand, the bracelet photograph in the other. Noel Chambers, a 45-year-old private investigator with a weathered face and the careful movements of someone trained as a paramedic, stepped out of his worn gray sedan and stopped dead when he saw me standing in Lester's driveway. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly. He looked at me like I'd risen from the dead. "You're supposed to be unconscious," he said, "in a deep coma. As you can see, I'm not." I walked closer, let him see my face clearly. "Your employer lied to you." Noel's jaw tightened. He looked from me to Lester and back. "I've been deceived." "Yes," I said. "You have. We need to talk." Lester led us inside to his living room. Noel sat on the couch, still processing the fact that I was vertical and coherent. I remained standing, had the high ground, intended to keep it. I placed the business card on the coffee table in front of him. Clayton's handwriting faced up, "Find evidence of senile old man." Noel stared at it. His face darkened. "Your son's handwriting," I said. "He asked you to find proof I was senile, manufacture it if necessary. I never manufactured anything." Noel's voice was tight. 8 months I followed you, watched your routine, grocery shopping, workshop visits, coffee with friends. I found nothing wrong. Zero evidence of cognitive decline. I set Eleanor's letter next to the business card, then the photograph of the bracelet. My wife died 3 weeks ago, I said. Before she died, she wrote this, warned me about my son's debt, told me to remember the bracelet I forged for his graduation. Then she photographed it and buried the evidence under a tree. Noel picked up the photograph, examined it closely. His expression shifted something between respect and sorrow. She was preparing for a war she knew was coming, he said quietly. And you were part of it. I kept my voice level, whether you meant to be or not. He told me you were declining. Noel set the photo down carefully. Said you'd been forgetting things, getting confused, asked me to document it. When I couldn't find anything, he got angry, asked me to fabricate evidence. And I refused. Noel met my eyes. I'm a lot of things, Mr. Garrett, but I'm not a fraud. Trust when you're 67 and your own son tried to erase you feels like learning to walk on a broken leg. But something in Noel's voice rang true. The way he'd said, I've been deceived, not defensive, just cold recognition of fact. What did Clayton tell you about yesterday? I asked. He called Monday night, said you'd had a stroke, were in a deep coma at his house, asked if I could come by today and sign documentation that you'd been showing severe cognitive decline before the medical event. Said it would help with guardianship proceedings. I felt the anger rise in my chest, forced it back down. What did you say? I said I'd think about it. That's why I'm here to tell him I won't lie under oath, NDA or not. Noel paused. But instead, I find you standing in a driveway lucid as I am. He poisoned me, I said. Arsenic or something similar, temporary paralysis, long enough to keep me quiet for a Friday guardianship hearing. Noel's face went pale. Poisoned. I escaped this morning through a window, found your business card in his jacket. That's when I called you. Noel looked at the business card again, at Clayton's handwriting. Something hardened in his expression, a decision being made. I have an NDA with your son, he said. If I break it, I lose my investigator's license. State board pulls certification for breach of confidentiality. I leaned forward. An NDA doesn't protect you when you're an instrument of a crime. I didn't commit any crime. No, but in Texas, elder fraud is federal. If you know about it and conceal it, you're an accessory. I pointed at the business card. You have documentation that my son hired you to manufacture evidence against me. That makes you either a witness or an accomplice. You choose. Noel's jaw worked. So I'm damned either way. Break the NDA, lose my license. Keep quiet, become an accessory to a federal crime. Now, that's about right, I said. Except one path leads to bankruptcy. The other leads to prison. The silence stretched. Lester sat quietly in his chair, watching. I stood over the coffee table, watching Noel wrestle with the decision. Finally, Noel looked up at me. Your son stopped contacting me 2 weeks ago. Complete silence. Then, Monday night out of nowhere, calls saying you're comatose and asked me to sign false documentation. He reached for his briefcase. I'll hand over the files, he said. Everything. Everything. 8 months of surveillance proving you're completely competent. Notes from every interaction with Clayton, including the conversations where he asked me to fabricate evidence. Noel pulled a folder from his briefcase and set it on the coffee table. And this. He pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. What's that? I asked. When Clayton first hired me, he claimed you were mismanaging finances, forgetting to pay bills, making bad decisions. Asked me to investigate your bank accounts. Noel opened the folder, pulled out pages of transaction records. I found 7 withdrawals over 6 months, $127,000 total. $127,000, nearly a quarter of everything I'd saved in 47 years of work. He stole it, I said. Noel shook his head. He didn't just steal it, he was methodical, careful. Used your signature, forged it, I'm guessing. Made withdrawals small enough not to trigger automatic bank alerts. He paused, hand on the second folder. But that's not what you need to see. When I started asking questions at Bank of America, the manager pulled security footage for me. All 7 transactions. He looked at me. There's something on that footage you need to see in person. Something I can't explain in this living room. What is it? Tomorrow, Noel said. I'll take you to the bank tomorrow morning. You need to see it yourself. Noel opened his laptop on Lester's kitchen table and turned the screen toward me. Before we go to the bank tomorrow, he said, you need to see what I've been documenting for 8 months. It was 6 in the evening. We'd moved from Lester's living room to the kitchen, coffee, brewing, the smell of it filling the small space. Noel's laptop screen glowed in the fading October light coming through the window. He clicked through files. Photographs appeared: me at the grocery store, me at the post office, me sitting on my workshop porch. Hundreds of photos, each one dated, time-stamped, annotated. 327 hours of observation, Noel said. February through September. I stared at myself through an investigator's lens. Strange, invasive, like watching a stranger live my life. Noel scrolled to the notes section. Every entry had the same conclusion repeated over and over in professional language. Subject appears cognitively sound. No decline observed. The subject engaged in normal daily activities. Memory sharp. No impairment detected. Subject demonstrated clear reasoning and decision-making capacity. 8 months of surveillance. Every single report saying the same thing. Every report, I said quietly, says I'm fine. Cognitively sound. No impairment. Sharp memory. Noel looked at me. Your son paid me to prove you were losing your mind. I found nothing. Vindication felt hollow when it came from a stranger's camera lens. But I'd take it. Clayton called me monthly. Noel continued clicking to a different file, demanding progress reports. Each time I said I hadn't observed any decline, he got more frustrated. Noel pulled up a document notes from phone conversations with Clayton, all dated and logged. By August, he was suggesting I might have missed signs. By September, he was explicit. Noel pointed to an entry dated September 20th. Exact words: I need something concrete. Make something up. I'm paying you enough. He asked you to fabricate evidence. The words came out flat. I shouldn't have been shocked, not after everything else. But hearing it stated so plainly, my son trying to buy false testimony. Multiple times, Noel said. That's when I told him we were done, terminated the contract, returned his final payment. And then 2 weeks of silence. Then Monday night he calls saying you're in a deep coma, asked me to sign medical documentation, stating you'd shown severe cognitive decline before the stroke. Noel closed the laptop. That's when I knew something was very wrong. My son hadn't just stolen my money, he'd tried to steal my identity, my competence, my right to exist as myself. Show me the financial records, I said. Noel opened the second folder, spread papers across Lester's kitchen table. Bank statements, transaction records, copies of withdrawal slips. 7 withdrawals, February through July. Amounts ranging from $15,000 to $25,000 each. Total $127,000. All from my Bank of America savings account. All bearing signatures that looked like mine, but weren't. Your son has been systematically draining your accounts for 6 months, Noel said quietly. I stared at the numbers. February 19th, 22,000. March 7th, 18,000. April 3rd, 15,000. 47 years I'd worked. 47 years of saving every dollar I could squeeze from workshop profits and Eleanor's teaching salary, retirement money, security, the cushion that was supposed to let us grow old without fear. That's a quarter of everything I saved, I said. My voice sounded distant. 40 years. We have dates, amounts, transaction numbers. Noel tapped the papers. Tomorrow we get the video footage. Then we have everything. $127,000, the cost of betrayal itemized and time-stamped. I didn't sleep much that night. Lester offered me his guest room. I lay there in the dark thinking about Clayton as a boy, teaching him to save money, opening his first bank account when he was 12, explaining compound interest, planning for the future. Now he was stealing mine. Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock. Noel drove us to Bank of America in downtown Waco, the same branch where Eleanor and I had opened our first joint account in 1977, where we'd deposited my Navy discharge pay, where we'd saved for Clayton's college. Margaret Hayes, the branch manager in her mid-40s with professional efficiency and no-nonsense demeanor, escorted us into her private office and pulled up the security system without hesitation. Once Noel presented his investigator credentials. Texas Elder Fraud Law, she said, typing on her keyboard. Bank is required to cooperate fully with authorized investigations. Mr. Garrett, I'll need you to sign this authorization. I signed. Margaret turned her monitor so we could see. 7 transactions, February through July, all flagged retroactively once Mr. Chambers brought them to our attention. The screen showed security camera footage, black and white, grainy, timestamp in the corner. February 19th, 2024, 10:47 a.m. A person approached the teller window, face completely obscured, surgical mask, sunglasses, baseball cap, pulled low. Impossible to identify. The same pattern all 7 times, Margaret said, clicking through the footage. Full disguise, forged signature on withdrawal slip, requests cashier's check made out to cash. February, March, April. Each video showed the same thing: masked figure, forged paperwork, money disappearing. May 15th, transaction 4. The figure approached the counter, slid the withdrawal slip across to the teller, reached for a pen. "Wait," I said. "Go back, May 15th. Margaret backed up the footage, played it again. The masked figure signed the paperwork. As the pen moved across the paper, the person's jacket sleeve rode up slightly. Just for a moment, maybe 2 seconds. "Can you zoom in?" I asked. "On the wrist, right there when the sleeve pulls up." Margaret adjusted the zoom. The grainy security footage sharpened slightly. The sleeve had pulled back just enough. On the wrist, something metallic caught the overhead bank lighting. My breath stopped. I knew exactly what I was looking at. I pulled Eleanor's photograph from my jacket pocket with trembling hands. The photograph she'd taken weeks before she died. The close-up of the steel bracelet I'd forged for Clayton's college graduation. Every weld mark visible, every detail documented. I held it beside the security monitor. The match was undeniable. Noel leaned, close eyes moving between the photograph and the frozen video frame. The distinctive 3 overlapping welds on the left side, my signature technique, the pattern I'd developed in 1985 when I was still learning metalwork. See these 3 welds? I pointed at the photograph, then at the screen. Overlapping pattern. I developed that technique 40 years ago. Never taught it to anyone else. That's your work," Noel said. Not a question, a statement. "I forged it for Clayton's college graduation, 20 years ago. Spent 3 weeks on it. My voice was steady, but my hands weren't. He wore it every day for years." Margaret Hayes stood behind us, witnessing the comparison. "The identification is irrefutable," she said quietly. I looked at Eleanor's photograph again. The clarity, the precision. She'd documented this bracelet like a forensic photographer, like she knew someday I'd need to identify it in exactly this context. "My wife photographed this," I said. She knew, somehow she knew. But how Eleanor had taken this photo weeks before she died, before Clayton poisoned me, before the guardianship petition. She'd photographed a graduation gift her son wore daily and turned it into evidence before there was even a crime to investigate. She was dying of cancer. I said more to myself than to Noel or Margaret, and she was building a case. Noel set the photograph down carefully beside the monitor. "Your wife was protecting you before she even knew what from. She saw our son more clearly than I ever did." The grief hit me fresh. Eleanor had known, had seen Clayton's nature, his greed, his willingness to hurt the people who loved him. And she'd prepared me for this moment, even though she wouldn't be here to see it. I'd forged that bracelet in my workshop on a Saturday afternoon, Clayton watching from his stool, asking questions about every weld. Now it was Exhibit A in his prosecution. Margaret picked up her phone. "I'm calling our legal department. This falls under Texas elder fraud statutes. We're required to provide full cooperation." 20 minutes later, 2 bank attorneys arrived, a man and woman in their 30s, carrying briefcases and legal pads. They reviewed the security footage, examined the photograph comparison, pulled transaction records. Under Texas Penal Code 32.55, the male attorney said, "We're required to cooperate fully with elder financial abuse investigations. We'll provide certified copies of all 7 transactions video, compilation, disc notarized statements, and forensic signature comparison." "How long?" Noel asked. 2 hours, Margaret said. "We'll have everything you need for court by noon." 2 hours. Noel and I sat in the bank's waiting area, drinking stale coffee from a machine that probably hadn't been serviced since 2015. The coffee tasted like burnt plastic, but I drank it anyway. Needed something to do with my hands. Lester had stayed home. Said 3 men in a bank manager's office was overkill. Said he'd make phone calls about lawyers. Now, it was just me and Noel waiting while attorneys compiled the evidence that would prove my son had been systematically stealing from me for 6 months. Noon. Margaret returned with the accordion folder, thick with documents. "Complete evidence package," she said, setting it on the table between us. 7 certified transaction records. Signature forgery analysis forensic examiner confirms none of these signatures match your documented handwriting samples. Video compilation disc with all 7 transactions. Notarized statements from myself and our security director. Noel opened the folder, started sorting through papers. "There's one more thing," Margaret said. Her voice had changed, quieter. "When we pulled the records, we discovered an 8th withdrawal attempt." I looked up. 8th, October 5th, 3 days ago. She pulled out another document. $50,000 withdrawal request. Same forged signature. Same cashier's check request. And, Noel asked. Declined, insufficient funds. Margaret pointed to the red stamp across the withdrawal slip. Your account balance had dropped below the requested amount. The teller refused the transaction. October 5th. 3 days before, Clayton made me tea. 3 days before he poisoned me. October 5th. The day my son's money ran out was the day my death sentence began. When stealing stopped working, Noel said, his voice cold and clinical. He tried to take everything. The timeline crystallized in front of me. 6 months of withdrawals, 15 to 25,000 at a time, bleeding my accounts dry. Then, October 5th, one last attempt for 50,000. Denied. Account empty. 2 days of silence. Then Monday night, October 7th. Clayton hands me chamomile tea with a smile. The tea wasn't his first choice. It was desperation. When he couldn't steal any more money, he escalated to poisoning and guardianship. Complete control. Total access to what was left. Noel spread the documents across Margaret's desk. 7 successful thefts, 1 failed attempt, $127,000 stolen, and the timeline that proved everything. October 5th withdrawal denied. October 7th I drink poison tea. October 11th scheduled guardianship hearing. He didn't poison you because he hated you, Noel said quietly. He poisoned you because he ran out of your money to steal. I stared at the documents. The evidence was complete. Overwhelming, irrefutable. But we had 48 hours until Friday's hearing. And we needed a lawyer. Valerie Townsend's law office was wedged between a cafe and a real estate agency on a quiet Waco street. Lester had made the call while we were still at the bank. Elder Wright's attorney, he'd said, specializes in financial abuse cases. She's your best shot. Wednesday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Noel drove. I sat in the passenger seat with the accordion folder of evidence on my lap. 47 hours until Friday's hearing. The office was small, walls lined with Texas legal code books and case files, each one labeled with an elderly person's name and versus family member. A reminder that I wasn't alone in this particular kind of betrayal. Valerie Townsend, a 52-year-old attorney with sharp eyes and gray hair, pulled back in a neat bun, greeted us at the door. Professional handshake firm, gripped the kind of person who'd seen enough to surprise hard. Mr. Garrett, Mr. Chambers. She motioned us to chairs across from her desk. Coffee. We accepted. She poured from a carafe that smelled like it had been sitting since morning, but it was hot and I needed something to do with my hands. Valerie sat, opened a fresh legal pad, clicked her pen. Start from the beginning, she said. Don't leave anything out. I need to hear everything. How long until the hearing? I asked. Friday morning, 9 a.m., Noel said. 47 hours. Valerie's expression didn't change. Then we don't have time to waste. Tell me. I talked for 45 minutes straight. Monday night, October 7th. Chamomile tea my son made me. 20 minutes later, paralysis. The tingling starting in my feet spreading upward until I couldn't move anything but my eyes. Lying on Clayton's couch, completely helpless, while my mind stayed terrifyingly alert. 2 a.m., door opening. Private physician checking my vitals. Clayton whispering, just make it look natural. He can't move before Friday. I need him silent at the guardianship hearing. Waking Tuesday morning with my left finger twitching, the drug wearing off, escaping through an unlocked window. The business card in Clayton's jacket, Noel Chambers Private Investigations. Clayton's handwriting on the back, find evidence of senile old man. Eleanor, my wife. The tin box under our bed gone stolen. The second tin box buried under the maple tree. Her letter warning me about Clayton's debt telling me to remember the bracelet. The photograph. The steel bracelet I'd forged for Clayton's college graduation. Every weld mark documented. Noel's 8 months of surveillance proving I was completely competent. Clayton asking him repeatedly to fabricate evidence. Noel refusing terminating the contract. The bank, 7 withdrawals, February through July, 15 to 25,000 at a time, $127,000 total, all forged signatures. Security footage, masked figure, 4th transaction. May 15th sleeve writing up, revealing the bracelet on the wrist. The 8th withdrawal, October 5th, $50,000, declined, insufficient funds. 3 days later, Clayton made me tea. 45 minutes of my life condensed into evidence, every piece of it, proof that the person I'd raised had tried to erase me. Valerie took methodical notes, never interrupted, showed zero skepticism, just listened with complete focus, occasionally asking for clarification on dates or amounts. When I finished, she set down her pen and reviewed the physical evidence spread across her desk. Eleanor's letter, the bracelet photograph, the business card with Clayton's handwriting, bank documents, Noel's surveillance files, video compilation disc. She picked up Eleanor's letter, read it carefully, set it down with visible respect. "Your wife left evidence before she died," she said quietly. "Remarkable woman." She saw what I couldn't, I said. Valerie examined the bracelet photograph. "You forged this yourself in your workshop. 20 years ago, college graduation gift, spent 3 weeks on it." She set it beside a still frame printed from the bank's security footage, the masked figure's wrist, the metallic glint catching overhead lights. "The welds match," she said, not a question. "My signature technique, 3 overlapping welds. I've never taught it to anyone." Valerie leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled thinking. "This is elder financial abuse," she said. "Identity theft, wire fraud, all at the federal level." I looked at her. "Federal? The amounts exceed $50,000. The systematic pattern demonstrates deliberate ongoing fraud. Cross-state banking transactions qualify as wire fraud." She pulled a legal codebook from the shelf, open to a marked page. "This isn't a civil family dispute, Mr. Garrett. This is federal criminal prosecution territory." Noel leaned forward. "Prison time. If we handle this correctly, your son won't just lose the guardianship petition, he'll be facing federal criminal charges." Valerie looked at me. $127,000 stolen. Wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. We're talking years, not months. The weight of that settled over the room. "What do we need to do?" I asked. Valerie pulled her legal pad close and wrote 5 numbered steps. 1, I file an emergency response tonight, contesting the guardianship and requesting an independent competency evaluation. 2, we present all fraud evidence, bank records, video, bracelet identification, forgery analysis. 3, we prove Clayton has a massive financial conflict of interest, disqualifying him as a petitioner. 4, we request an immediate protective order barring Clayton from accessing your accounts. 5, we ask the court to refer this case to federal law enforcement. She looked up at me. "But there's one critical element. Clayton cannot know you've recovered." "What?" I said. "We were building a trap with my son's own greed as bait, and Friday morning at 9 a.m., it would spring shut. If he knows you escaped, he lawyers up, destroys evidence, possibly flees. Right now, he thinks you're still incapacitated in his house. He thinks Friday's hearing will be a formality walk-in, present his case to an empty respondent's chair, walk out with guardianship." Valerie's eyes were sharp. "We need him overconfident, complacent, walking into that courtroom expecting easy victory. And instead, you'll be sitting there, lucid, prepared, with a lawyer and enough evidence to bury him." I felt something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. 40 hours until Friday 9 a.m., I said. 40 hours to be perfect, Valerie said. "Can we do it?" I thought about Eleanor, about the evidence she'd left me, about every year I'd spent teaching Clayton right from wrong, only to watch him choose greed. "We have to," I said. She paused. "Friday morning, Clayton thinks he's walking into a routine bureaucratic victory. He has no idea that the man he tried to silence will be waiting there to strip away his mask." I thanked her and hung up. I shook her hand. 40 hours until Friday 9 a.m. The countdown had begun. The IRS letter had arrived 6 months ago, and I'd been drowning in confusion ever since. Wednesday afternoon, 4 o'clock, still in Valerie's office. The countdown clock read 39 hours until Friday's hearing, but we weren't done building the case. Valerie pulled another document from my evidence folder, the IRS notice I'd brought, crumpled from being read and reread 100 times, trying to understand what I'd done wrong. "Tax liability," she read aloud. $78,500 for unreported income. "I don't have unreported income," I said. "I'm retired. Everything I have is documented." "I know." Valerie spread the bank withdrawal records beside the IRS letter. "Look at the timeline. Clayton withdraws $127,000 from your account between February and July. Doesn't report it as a gift. Doesn't declare it as income. The IRS sees large withdrawals from your account and automatically assumes it's your unreported earnings." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "He stole my money," I said slowly, "then made me liable for taxes on it. Brilliant and cruel," Valerie said. "Creates an immediate financial crisis. Makes you look incompetent, can't manage taxes, can't understand basic financial obligations. Builds the narrative that you need a guardian." I thought about the 6 months I'd spent staring at that letter, calling the IRS, getting transferred between departments, trying to explain that I hadn't earned this income, hadn't received it, Didn't understand where it came from. The confusion. The mounting fear that maybe I was losing my mind. I spent 6 months trying to understand that letter, I said. Thought I was going crazy. That was the point, Valerie said quietly. Make you look financially incompetent. Build the case for guardianship. Every piece calculated. My son hadn't just stolen from me. He'd built an entire architecture of my destruction, brick by brick, lie by lie. Noah leaned forward. There's something else you need to know. About how he found his lawyer. His guardianship attorney, I asked. Clayton contacted 3 different guardianship attorneys before the one who filed this petition. Noel pulled out notes from his surveillance file. I documented every consultation. First lawyer asked for medical records. Second wanted third-party cognitive evaluations. Third requested documentation from Clayton's employer, proving he had time and resources to serve as guardian. And Valerie asked. Clayton walked away from all 3. Too many questions? Too much scrutiny. Noel flipped a page. Fourth lawyer filed the petition based on Clayton's word alone. No medical records, no evaluations, no evidence. He shopped for someone who wouldn't ask questions, I said, and found one. Noel confirmed. I looked at Valerie. How long was he planning this? She glanced at Noel, then back at me. Show him the surveillance timeline. Noel opened his laptop, pulled up his earliest case notes. February 2024, he said. 8 months ago, Clayton contacted me through a referral, said he was worried about his aging father showing signs of cognitive decline. Asked me to document it discreetly. February. 8 months before I drank poison tea. Before the guardianship petition. Before I even knew I was in danger. Eleanor was alive, I said. My voice sounded distant. Barely, Noel said quietly. She'd just been diagnosed. Had maybe 6-7 months according to the doctors. He pulled up photographs on his laptop. Me at the grocery store. Me at the post office. Me walking Lester's dog when he was out of town. I thought you were from that Austin contractor I had a dispute with, I said, remembering. Saw you around the neighborhood in February, March. Thought you were surveilling me for a lawsuit. Your son paid me $3,000 a month to follow you, Noel said. $3,000 a month for 8 months. $24,000 spent on surveillance alone before he even started stealing. Noel scrolled through his notes. First 2 months I recorded 3 incidents he thought were significant. You walked up to the wrong house one afternoon. Neighbor's place identical layout to yours. You searched for your keys for 5 minutes, found them in your jacket pocket. You called Lester by the wrong name, once corrected yourself immediately. Normal things, Valerie said. Exactly. I documented 0 cognitive decline. 0 evidence of dementia or confusion. Just normal 67-year-old man living his life. Noel looked at me. I told Clayton this in my March report. He wasn't happy. What did he say? Look closer. You must have missed something. Noel's expression hardened. Month later, April, he got explicit. Called me, asked, can you edit the footage, make those incidents look more serious? The room went quiet. You refused, I said. February 2024. Eleanor had 7 months left to live, and Clayton was already planning to erase me. I document truth, not fiction, Noel said. I told him I wouldn't fabricate evidence. He tried to convince me for another 20 minutes, offered more money. I refused again. But he didn't fire you, Valerie said. No, kept paying me monthly through September. Kept hoping I'd find something real he could use. I never did. Noel closed the laptop. When I finally terminated the contract in September because he kept asking me to lie, he went quiet for 2 weeks. Then, Monday night, he calls saying, "You're in a coma." Valerie set down her pen and looked at me across the desk. "Your son started this surveillance 8 months ago," she said. February 2024. I did the math. February to September. 7 months. Eleanor died in late September, I said. The words felt heavy. 3 weeks before he poisoned me. Valerie nodded slowly. He was planning to rob you while his mother was dying. Started the surveillance when she was diagnosed. Hired the investigator while she was in and out of hospitals. Made the first withdrawal in February while she was getting chemo. Eleanor lying in bed, losing weight, losing hair, losing time. And Clayton sitting in consultation rooms with lawyers and investigators planning how to steal from his father the moment his mother stopped breathing. That's who we're facing Friday, Valerie said quietly. I sat there in silence processing the timeline, the surveillance, the shopping for compliant lawyers, the systematic theft, the IRS trap, the fabrication requests, the poisoning when everything else failed. Not impulse, not desperation making him do something terrible in a moment of weakness. Calculation. 8 months of methodical planning. Started while his mother fought cancer, executed the week after I buried her. Lester's phone rang at 6 p.m. just as we sat down to dinner. We'd returned to his house from Valerie's office an hour earlier, exhausted from a day of evidence gathering and legal strategy. 36 hours until Friday's courthouse confrontation. The countdown clock ticked in the back of my mind with every breath. Lester had made spaghetti simple hot, exactly what we needed. The three of us sat around his kitchen table. Me, Lester, Noel. Eating in relative silence, the kind of quiet that comes when people are too tired and too focused to make small talk. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Noel said, twirling pasta on his fork. Valerie drills you on competency questions. I'll be ready, I said. You think he suspects anything yet? Lester asked, worry creasing his face. Noel shook his head. If he did, we'd know. Clayton doesn't hide panic well. I watched him for 8 months. When he's stressed, he makes mistakes. The landline rang. All three of us froze. Lester stood, walked to the wall-mounted phone, checked the caller ID. Clayton Garrett, he said quietly. The room went silent. My heart hammered. Lester looked at me questioning. I gestured answer. Act normal. Lester picked up the phone, his voice perfectly casual. Hello. I could hear Clayton's voice through the receiver, tinny and distant, but recognizable. My son. Lester? Hey, it's Clayton. Have you seen my father? Vernon. Lester said, like he was thinking about it. No, haven't seen him these past few days. Why? He had an episode Monday night. Medical issue. I've been trying to track him down, make sure he's okay. Lester's eyes met mine across the kitchen. I shook my head slightly. Keep lying? Can't help you, Lester said. Sorry. If I see him, I'll let you know. Yeah, thanks. Clayton's voice sounded strained, worried, searching. The line went dead. Lester hung up slowly, then turned to look at me. He doesn't know, Noel whispered. He has no idea you're free. I sat there processing it. Clayton had called Lester because he was searching. Still searching. 3 days after I'd escaped through his window, my son had no idea where I was or what I was doing. He thought I was still incapacitated, helpless, somewhere between his Houston house and a hospital bed, too confused or too sick to find my way back. My son's voice on that phone, worried, searching, clueless, was the sound of a trap about to spring shut. Clayton didn't know about the escape, the evidence gathering, Noel's defection, the bank video, the bracelet match, Eleanor's buried letters, Valerie, the emergency legal response being filed tonight. He was completely blind. Before I tell you what happened, when Friday morning finally came, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think Clayton deserves what's coming. B, if you think a father should show mercy, and tell me why in one sentence. Quick note, some details ahead are adapted for dramatic impact, but the message is what matters. I looked at Noel and Lester across the table. He's searching, I said. Still thinks I'm helpless somewhere. He doesn't know about the evidence, Noel said. The lawyer, any of it. Friday morning, I said slowly, he walks into that courtroom expecting an unopposed guardianship petition, expecting me to not show up or to show up incoherent and confused, expecting easy victory. Instead, Lester asked. We were playing chess, and Clayton thought he had already won, but he'd never seen the board from my side. Instead, I'll be sitting there, I said, fully competent, with a lawyer, with 8 pieces of evidence, with bank video showing his bracelet on the thief's wrist, with Eleanor's letter, with everything. The power had shifted without Clayton knowing. He thought he controlled the game, thought he'd poison me into submission, filed his petition counted down to Friday's formality. He had no idea that every move he'd made had left evidence, that his own investigator had turned against him, that his dying mother had prepared weapons for me to use. The phone rang again. We all jumped. Lester checked the ID. Different number, area code 512. Austin, Noel said. Answer it. Lester picked up. Hello. A woman's voice, professional, familiar. Lester, it's Valerie Townsend. Is Vernon still there? Lester handed me the phone. It's done, Valerie said without preamble. Emergency response filed with Harris County Court. Judge Iris Sinclair reviewing the file tonight. I closed my eyes. The hearing, still Friday 9 a.m. But now, it's not Clayton's unopposed petition. It's a contested guardianship with both sides presenting evidence. You'll appear in person demonstrating full competence. I've attached all 8 pieces of evidence to our response. He doesn't know, I said. No, and he won't until he walks into that courtroom and sees you sitting at the respondent's table with me beside you. Valerie's voice was cold and satisfied. Your son has no idea what's coming Friday morning. The power had officially shifted. Clayton thought he controlled the board petition, filed hearings scheduled father, missing, and helpless. He thought he'd already won. Actually, I held all the pieces. Every piece of evidence, every witness, every strategic advantage. The 36 hours, Valerie said. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow we prepare you for testimony. Friday morning at 9 a.m. She paused. Friday morning, your son walks into Harris County Courthouse, expecting to take control of your life. Instead, he's going to lose everything. I thanked her and hung up. 36 hours until Friday 9 a.m. I looked at Lester and Noel. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of Lester's wall clock. Emergency response filed, I said. It's official. Noel nodded slowly. Judge reviewing tonight. By tomorrow morning, she'll know everything Clayton did, everything he tried to hide. And Clayton, Lester asked. Clayton's somewhere in Houston right now, I said. Probably calling more people, searching for his missing father, planning his courtroom victory, making sure everything's in place for Friday. I thought about him, my son, sitting in his expensive house, probably in his home office, phone in hand, confident and calm because he thought I was too sick or too confused to fight back. He had no idea that while he searched, I'd already filed my response, already armed myself with evidence, already turned his own hired investigator into my witness. The hunter had become the hunted. The 36 hours, I said again. Lester poured coffee. We sat around the kitchen table, the remains of dinner, cooling on our plates, and talked through tomorrow's schedule. Testimony preparation, competency drills, final evidence review. But underneath every word was the countdown. 36 hours until I looked my son in the eye across a courtroom and destroyed him with the evidence his own mother had left behind. Tomorrow we'd prepare for battle. 24 hours until Friday, and Valerie's office had transformed into a courtroom. Thursday morning, 9 a.m. I'd barely slept. Spent the night at Lester's house staring at the ceiling, running through questions and answers in my head, trying to prepare for something I'd never done before, testify against my own son. Valerie had pushed her conference table against the wall. In its place, a single chair sat, centered in the room, isolated, exposed. The witness chair, she said. Get comfortable. Tomorrow you'll sit here for real. I sat down. The chair felt different than I'd expected. Not physically just a standard office chair, padded back armrests. But sitting there in the middle of the room, with Valerie and Noel watching me, I suddenly felt naked. Vulnerable. Tomorrow, Valerie said, the judge sits there. She pointed to where her desk would be. Court reporter there. Clayton and his lawyer at that table. Me and you at the other. Gallery behind us, maybe 10-15 people watching. Strangers watching. My son watching. All of them listening to me testify that my own child had poisoned me and stolen from me. The reality hit harder than expected. Noel plays the judge, Valerie continued. I observe first. Then I become Clayton's lawyer and attack your testimony. You need to be ready for both. Noel stood adopting a formal bearing. Shoulders back. Serious expression. He'd watched enough courtroom proceedings during his investigation career to know how judges carried themselves. State your full name and date of birth for the record, Judge Sinclair said. Vernon Matthew Garrett, born October 7th, 1957. Current address, currently staying with Lester Whitfield in Waco, Texas. Temporary housing after selling my home in September following my wife's death. Describe your financial situation. Monthly pension of $2,900 from combined naval retirement and workshop income. Savings originally $230,000, now reduced to approximately $100,000 after unauthorized withdrawals. Noel continued for 30 minutes. Standard competency evaluation questions. Each one designed to test memory, reasoning, understanding. Why are you here today? I'm here because my son poisoned me with a sedative Monday evening, then filed fraudulent guardianship papers, claiming I'm incompetent to manage my own affairs. Do you understand the nature of these proceedings? Yes, this is a guardianship hearing. My son petitioned to be appointed my legal guardian. I'm contesting that petition because I'm fully competent and his claims are false. Can you manage your own financial affairs? Yes, I managed a successful mechanical workshop for 40 years, handled all business accounting, filed taxes, managed investments. The confusion my son cited was intentionally created by him. He withdrew funds without my knowledge, then didn't report them, causing IRS issues that made me appear financially incompetent. 67 years old, and I was learning to testify against my own son, a sentence I never imagined assembling in my lifetime. After 30 minutes, Valerie nodded. Good. You'll pass the competency evaluation easily. Clear answers, specific details, no confusion or hesitation. Break, Noel said, dropping the judicial bearing. Coffee? We took 10 minutes, stretched, drank stale office coffee, then Valerie stood. Now the hard part, she said. I'm Clayton's attorney. My job is to discredit you, make you look confused or vindictive or lying. You ready? I sat back down in the witness chair. Valerie's entire demeanor changed. Aggressive, confrontational. Not the supportive lawyer who'd been helping me. Now she was the enemy. Mr. Garrett, you claim you were paralyzed Monday evening, yet you drove a vehicle Tuesday morning. Explain that contradiction. The sedative wore off after approximately 8 hours. Movement returned gradually starting Tuesday morning. How do you know it was a sedative? Do you have toxicology proof? When it is indexposed. No toxicology proof. But I have other evidence, 7 fraudulent bank withdrawals totaling the stolen amount, security video. Showing the thief wearing a bracelet, I hand-forged the private investigator my son hired, who documented 8 months proving I'm competent, and a letter my wife wrote warning me about my son's intentions. You're accusing your own son of theft based on a bracelet? They based on multiple pieces of evidence. The bracelet is one identifier among many. The forged signatures, the NDA with a licensed private investigator, the sedative compound in the tea. Valerie pressed harder. Isn't it possible you're confused, that you misunderstood your son's intentions? No, I heard him at 2 a.m. Wednesday morning, instructing the physician to keep me incapacitated until Friday's hearing. I have his handwritten note on a business card, asking a detective to fabricate evidence of my senility. These aren't misunderstandings. Valerie broke character. Good. Don't get defensive. Don't explain your emotions. Just state facts. Let the facts defend you. We continued for another hour, Valerie attacking from every angle, my health, my memory, my relationship with Clayton, my motivations. Each time I answered with facts, not feelings, evidence, not accusations. By 11 a.m., I was exhausted. You're ready, Valerie said. You're ready for the questions. She sat down across from me, her expression turning serious. But questions aren't the hard part. I looked at her. The hard part, she said quietly, is sitting 10 feet from your son while a judge decides between you, not showing emotion when he lies, not standing up and confronting him when he claims he was just trying to help his confused father. Remembering this is a legal proceeding, not a family fight. Valerie was teaching me to be a witness, not a father, to separate 42 years of love from 48 hours of evidence. When he walks into that courtroom tomorrow, she continued, every cell in your body is going to want confrontation. You can't. You sit quietly at our table, wait to be called, testify when asked. Let me fight the legal battle. Can I do it? I asked. Sit there while he lies to a judge about me. I don't know, Valerie said honestly. Most people can't. Seeing their own child lie under oath breaks something inside them. They lose control, start yelling, get ejected from court. I won't, I said. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. Noel packed up his notes. 24 hours. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow we leave Waco at 7 a.m., arrive Houston by 10. Hearing starts at 11. Valerie walked me to the door. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., we meet here. Drive to Houston together. You'll be ready for the judge, ready for the lawyers, ready for the evidence. She paused, hand on the doorknob. But will you be ready to look your son in the eye and call him a thief? I didn't answer. I didn't know. 24 hours to find out. 24 hours became 12, then 6, then 1. Thursday night, 9:30 p.m. I sat alone in Lester's guest room, holding Eleanor's photograph. The room was small, twin-bed single nightstand window, overlooking the quiet Waco street. Lester had gone to bed an hour ago. Noel was at a hotel downtown. I should have been sleeping. Instead, I stared at Eleanor's face in the photograph, the one I'd kept since her funeral. Her smile, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, the gray hair she'd refused to dye, even when the cancer started. I thought about Clayton, not the 42-year-old man sitting in a Houston courtroom right now, confident and prepared, but Clayton at 7 years old, standing beside me on the shore of Lake Waco, with a fishing rod too big for his hands, asking why the fish weren't biting. Because you have to be patient, I'd told him. Good things take time. He'd caught his first base that afternoon, held it up grinning so wide, I thought his face would split. Where had that boy gone? When had patience turned into greed? Eleanor, I said aloud to the photograph, I don't know if I can do this. That's still our boy in that courtroom. The photograph didn't answer, but I heard her voice anyway, the way she'd sounded 2 years ago when she'd warned me, someone sees you as an obstacle. She'd meant Clayton. She'd known. But you left that bracelet for a reason, I said. You knew what he'd become. I set the photograph on the nightstand and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I would testify against my only child. The Navy had taught me to face enemies, identify threats, neutralize dangers. They never taught me what to do when the enemy was the boy I'd raised. This wasn't about justice anymore. It was about saying goodbye. The Clayton I'd loved, the 7-year-old with the fishing rod, the 12-year-old learning to forge steel in my workshop, the 22-year-old graduating college wearing the bracelet I'd made him, that Clayton was already gone. Had been gone for years, maybe. The man who'd poisoned me was a stranger wearing my son's face. I slept maybe 2 hours. Friday morning, 5:45 a.m., I climbed into Lester's truck and pointed it south toward Houston. 3 hours on I-35. 3 hours alone with my thoughts and the ghosts of every fatherhood failure that had led to this moment. Pre-dawn darkness covered the highway. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, 20 years of Navy discipline, keeping them from shaking. But my mind wouldn't stop. 20 years in the Navy, and I never learned how to be a father, I said to the empty cab. Too many deployments, too much distance. How many of Clayton's baseball games had I missed? How many parent-teacher conferences had Eleanor attended alone? How many times had I chosen workshop orders over family dinners? I'd taught him to forge steel, to fix engines, to save money and plan ahead. But I'd never taught him why those things mattered. Never taught him that family was more valuable than any amount of money. Never taught him that trust once broken couldn't be welded back together. Maybe if I'd been there more, maybe if I'd put down the wrench and picked up the phone, maybe if I'd noticed the warning signs Eleanor saw. Maybe the highway stretched flat and endless, mile markers counting down. Huntsville, Conroe, the northern suburbs of Houston appearing as dawn broke pink and orange over the Texas plains. I passed a highway sign, Houston 47 miles. 47 miles. The number felt biblical. 40 days in the wilderness, 40 years wandering. 47 miles to judgment. 7:45 a.m. I-45. South merged into Houston traffic. Office workers commuting, delivery trucks, normal Friday morning, for everyone except me. For me, this was the day I would look my son in the eye and call him a thief. 7 stories of granite and glass, American flag snapping in the October wind. People streamed through the entrance, lawyers with briefcases, plaintiffs with worried faces, defendants trying to look confident. Ordinary people fighting their own battles, family disputes, contract disagreements, property claims. I wasn't alone in this particular kind of betrayal. Valerie stood at the entrance, briefcase in hand, professional Navy suit, gray hair pulled back. She saw me and walked over. "Vernon," she said, "you ready?" "As I'll ever be." She studied my face. "Did you sleep?" "Some." "And coffee." She pulled a granola bar from her briefcase, handed it to me. "Eat this. You need your blood sugar steady for testimony." I took it, didn't argue. We walked through security together. Metal detectors, ID checks, elevator to the 6th floor, marble floors echoing with footsteps and hushed conversations. Court was starting at 9 a.m., 8:40 now, 20 minutes. We walked down the hallway toward courtroom 6. Through the small window in the door, I could see inside. Clayton sat at a table on the left side. His lawyer beside him, middle-aged man in expensive suit reviewing documents. Clayton wore a dark blue suit I didn't recognize. Probably cost more than my monthly pension. He looked older than I remembered, harder. Success had made him confident, and confidence had made him cruel. As I watched his lawyer said something, Clayton laughed, casual, entitled, like this was just another business meeting. No remorse, no worry, no doubt. My last hesitation vanished. Valerie touched my elbow. "It's time." My right hand trembled. I made a fist, the same hand that had taught Clayton to throw a baseball when he was 6. The same hand that had forged his graduation bracelet. The same hand that now carried Eleanor's evidence against him. The tremor stopped. "Once we walk through that door," Valerie said quietly, "there's no turning back. You understand?" I looked at her. "He crossed that line when he poisoned me. I'm just finishing what Eleanor started." Valerie reached for the door handle. The hinges whispered across marble as the door swung open. The sound cut through the courtroom. Clayton's head turned toward the movement. His lawyer looked up. The bailiff shifted attention. For one suspended breath, father and son locked eyes across 20 feet of empty air. I saw the exact moment Clayton recognized me. The exact moment he understood I wasn't incapacitated in his Houston house. The exact moment he realized everything was about to end. His face went from confident to confused to pale in the space of 2 heartbeats. I walked through the door. My boot heels echoed on marble as I walked down the courtroom aisle. Every eye turned, but I watched only Clayton's face drain white. Valerie walked beside me. Briefcase in hand, her presence steady and professional. The gallery held maybe 15 people, other cases waiting curious spectators, a court reporter setting up her machine. But I saw only my son. Clayton gripped the edge of his table knuckles bone white. His lawyer, middle-aged man in expensive suit, looked confused, clearly not expecting the supposedly incapacitated father to walk through that door upright and lucid. I walked to the respondent table on the right side of the courtroom, sat down in the chair Valerie pulled out for me, set my hands flat on the table, fingers steady, met Clayton's eyes without flinching. He looked away first. "Let's get this done," I said quietly to Valerie. She nodded, arranging folders on the table between us. Noel Chambers sat in the gallery behind us, witness not participant, but present to testify when called. I heard him lean forward, whisper something I couldn't quite catch. Clayton's lawyer whispered back, urgent and low, "He looks healthy." "Shut up," Clayton hissed. "Just shut up." Too late. I'd already seen the recognition in Clayton's eyes. The poisoning had failed. The paralysis had worn off. His father wasn't helpless in a hospital bed somewhere. His father was sitting 10 feet away, fully competent, fully armed with evidence. Clayton looked healthier than I'd seen him in months. Expensive suit, professional haircut. But beneath the polish, I saw panic starting to set in. The drug hadn't broken me. It had hardened my resolve. The bailiff stood. "All rise." We stood. The judge entered from her chambers, an African-American woman in her mid-50s with silver-streaked hair, pulled back reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and the sharp judicial presence of someone who'd heard every lie twice. She wore black robes, carried a thick folder, moved with the efficient grace of someone who didn't waste time. She sat. We sat. Judge Sinclair opened the folder, scanned the first page, then looked up at the courtroom. Her gaze moved from Clayton's table to mine, lingering on me for a moment. "Case number 2024-GC-8847, she said. Her voice carried authority without needing volume. "Garrett Emergency Guardianship Petition. Mr. Clayton Garrett petitioning for emergency guardianship of his father, Vernon Garrett, alleging mental incompetence and inability to manage personal affairs." She looked directly at me. "You must be Mr. Vernon Garrett." "Yes, Your Honor. And you're here to contest this petition." "Yes, ma'am." Judge Sinclair removed her reading glasses, let them hang on the chain. "I've reviewed the emergency response filed by your attorney, Ms. Townsend. Quite comprehensive. But before we get to evidence and arguments, I'd like to assess your competency directly." "I understand, Your Honor." The courtroom air conditioning hummed. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. From 12 feet away, I could smell Clayton's cologne, same expensive brand Eleanor had bought him for Christmas 2019. The scent of it made my stomach turn. "State your full name and date of birth for the record," Judge Sinclair said. "Current address. Currently staying with a friend in Waco, Texas. Lester Whitfield, 847 Oak Street. Temporary housing after selling my home in September, following my wife's death. And prior to that, I owned a home in Waco for 37 years. Sold it in September after my wife Eleanor passed away. Moved to Houston to stay with my son." "Your social security number." I recited it. 9 digits, no hesitation. "Do you know what day it is?" "The Friday, October 11th, 2024. "Do you understand why you're in this courtroom today?" I looked at Clayton. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Yes, ma'am. My son filed an emergency guardianship petition, claiming I'm incompetent to manage my own affairs. I'm here to reject that application." Judge Sinclair made notes. "Can you describe your current financial situation?" "Monthly income of $2,900 from naval retirement and workshop pension. Original savings of approximately $230,000, now reduced to roughly $103,000 after unauthorized withdrawals my son made between February and July this year." "Unauthorized withdrawals," Judge Sinclair repeated, looking at Clayton's lawyer. Clayton's lawyer started to stand. "Your Honor, we're not here to—" "I'm assessing competency, counselor. Sit down." Judge Sinclair turned back to me. "Continue, Mr. Garrett." My hand rested flat on the table, perfectly steady. The same hand that had trembled in the hospital 4 days ago. The same hand Clayton thought would never grip a steering wheel again. "My wife Eleanor died September 23rd. The day after her funeral, my son withdrew $22,000 from our joint account without my knowledge or permission. 6 more withdrawals followed over the next 6 months. Total amount, stolen $127,000. The courtroom was silent. "And you remember all these dates and amounts?" Judge Sinclair asked. "Yes, ma'am. I have bank records to confirm them, but I remember. February 19th, $22,000. March 7th, $18,000. April 3rd, 15,000. May 15th, 25,000. June 9th, 19,000. July 2nd, 23,000. August 6th, 5,000. Total 127,000. I saw Clayton's jaw tighten. He'd hoped the poisoning would erase my memory, make me confused, make me look incompetent. Instead, I was reciting his crimes from memory with perfect accuracy. Your Honor. I continued. On Monday, October 7th, my son gave me chamomile tea. 20 minutes later, I was completely paralyzed. I heard him tell a private physician at 2 a.m. that I needed to stay incapacitated until this hearing. I escaped Tuesday morning when the sedative wore off. Judge Sinclair set down her pen. You're alleging your son poisoned you to prevent you from appearing at this hearing. On this Yes, ma'am, and I have evidence to prove it. Judge Sinclair looked at Clayton, then at Clayton's lawyer, then back at me. Mr. Garrett, your father, seems remarkably lucid for someone allegedly suffering from dementia and incompetence. Clayton's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we'd like to request... Sit down, counselor. Judge Sinclair removed her reading glasses and set them on the bench. She looked directly at Clayton with an expression I recognized from 30 years of military tribunals, the look superior officers give sailors caught lying under oath. Clayton saw it too, as I watched my son's confidence crack like thin ice. Valerie Townsend rose from the respondents' table with the kind of controlled elegance that reminded me of Eleanor preparing for battle. She carried a leather portfolio that I knew contained every weapon my wife had forged before her death. Your Honor. Valerie said, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. What you're about to see isn't just evidence of financial fraud. It's documentation of a son's systematic betrayal of his father, exposed with the help of the very investigator the petitioner hired to manufacture lies. Exhibit B, investigator Noel Chambers' surveillance report on Vernon Garrett compiled over 8 months, ending September 2024. 327 hours of documented observation. The document appeared on screen, Noel's professional letterhead, his investigator's license number, printed beneath his name. Valerie read aloud, Subject demonstrates excellent cognitive function across all observed interactions. Memory, sharp judgment, sound zero indicators of cognitive decline. Subject remains fully competent to manage personal and financial affairs. Conclusion, no evidence of dementia or incompetence found. That report was the professional conclusion of Mr. Chambers. When Clayton demanded he fabricate evidence, Mr. Chambers refused and terminated the contract. Clayton then forced a strict non-disclosure agreement on him, attempting to buy his silence. But, as the court knows, an NDA cannot be used to protect or conceal an ongoing criminal conspiracy. From where I sat, I caught a glimpse of Noel across the gallery. His jaw was tight, but he nodded firmly. He had willingly broken that NDA to hand over these files, choosing justice over a corrupt paycheck. Exhibit D, forensic handwriting analysis comparing Vernon Garrett's genuine signature with the signatures on these withdrawal slips. A certified document appeared stamped and notarized. Expert conclusion, the signatures are forgeries. The person signing these withdrawal slips was not my client. Exhibit E, letter from the Internal Revenue Service dated September 4th of 2024, addressed to Vernon Garrett. Tax liability of $7,800 and $500 resulting from unreported capital gains. Gains that occurred when Clayton liquidated his father's investment accounts without proper documentation. Mr. Garrett didn't just lose his savings. He inherited a massive tax debt from his son's fraud. Exhibit G, Clayton Garrett's financial records obtained through court subpoena. Total debts over $180,000. Gambling losses, business failures, and personal loans from predatory lenders explaining exactly why he panicked when the bank blocked his final $50,000 withdrawal attempt. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Sinclair's gavel cracked like a rifle shot. Order. The original files filled the projection screen. I looked at my son. Clayton sat very still, his hands gripping the armrest. Whatever confidence he'd walked in with had drained completely out of him. I recognized the silence of a man watching his entire architecture of lies collapse. I watched Dr. Ian Blackwell open his mouth, close it, and open it again. Whatever he'd come to say, he couldn't say it. The man who had pressed 2 cold fingers to my throat 4 days ago, while I lay paralyzed on Clayton's couch, now stood 10 feet away from a man who was very much alive and fully functional. His silence answered louder than any words could. Your Honor, my evaluation was... Dr. Blackwell's voice cracked. The circumstances have changed. Changed how Dr. Blackwell, Judge Sinclair's tone, could have frozen Houston in August. When you entered that home at 2 in the morning, what exactly did you observe, and what did you report to the petitioner? Make scores. Dr. Blackwell's silence answered louder than words. Clayton's attorney shot to his feet, desperation written across his face. Your Honor, this is simply a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Adult children frequently disagree with elderly parents about financial management. My client acted in good faith. Counselor, Judge Sinclair didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I've seen the evidence, the forged signatures, the complicity of a private physician ignoring medical ethics, the arsenic. Unless you have something substantive to say, sit down. The attorney sat. I felt the weight shift in the courtroom. The case was over. Everyone knew it. Clayton's confident smirk had vanished, completely replaced by the pale, tight-jawed expression of a man watching his world collapse in real time. Then a chair scraped against the gallery floor. Your Honor, Celeste's voice barely carried across the courtroom. I need to testify. Please. The courtroom erupted. Clayton spun in his seat, face draining of what little color remained. Celeste, sit down, now. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge he'd spoken. She kept her eyes locked on Judge Sinclair. Mrs. Garrett, the judge said slowly, do you understand you're asking to testify against your husband? Yes, ma'am, Celeste's voice steadied. I understand. Approach the stand. Bailiffs swear her in. I watched my daughter-in-law walk down the center aisle. She passed within 3 feet of Clayton's table. He reached for her arm. She stepped away without breaking stride, without meeting his eyes, and I saw something in Clayton's expression I'd never seen before. Pure animal fear. The bailiff swore Celeste in. A man in his early 40s wearing a gray uniform, calm and professional, despite the chaos crackling through the room. His nameplate read, Marcus Reed. He'd probably seen 1,000 courtroom dramas, but even he looked surprised when Celeste raised her right hand. Valerie approached the witness stand. Mrs. Garrett, what did your husband tell you about Vernon Garrett's condition? Celeste's hands twisted in her lap. Clayton told me his father had maybe 6 months left. Final stage cognitive decline. He said we had to act fast before Vernon hurt himself, or lost everything to scammers. Did you believe him? Yes. Tears tracked down Celeste's face. Vernon would call asking for help, sounding confused, saying strange things. Clayton said it was the dementia talking. He said blocking the calls was protecting him. I remembered those calls, the fog in my brain, my slurred words, the confusion that came from whatever Clayton had been putting in my tea. Celeste had heard me at my worst drugged incoherent and believed she was witnessing disease instead of poisoning. Did your husband tell you what he put in Vernon's tea on the night of October 7th? Steens despesest ons, dort. What? No. What do you mean what he put in the tea? Her voice climbed genuine shock written across her features. I thought Vernon was just confused from dementia. Clayton said his mother's death had accelerated the decline. I didn't know. She broke down, shoulders shaking. I watched my daughter-in-law cry on the witness stand and realized the truth. She hadn't known. Clayton had lied to everyone, even the woman who shared his bed. He'd turned his wife into an unwitting accomplice, let her believe she was helping a dying man instead of enabling systematic abuse. How do you measure the depth of a betrayal that encompasses everyone you touch? Valerie waited for Celeste to compose herself. When did you realize something was wrong? Tuesday night. Celeste wiped her eyes. Clayton came home with guardianship papers, and he was celebrating. Said we'd finally secured Vernon's assets before the dementia destroyed everything. But the way he said it, there was no sadness, no grief for his dying father, just excitement about the money. She looked at Clayton for the first time since taking the stand. I started asking questions. He got angry, told me to mind my own business. That's when I knew. Thank you, Mrs. Garrett. Valerie returned to the plaintiff's table. No further questions. Clayton's attorney declined to cross-examine. What could he ask? His client's own wife had just dismantled whatever remained of his defense. Judge Sinclair called a 10-minute recess. I sat in the gallery while the courtroom emptied, watching Clayton whisper furiously with his attorney. Celeste sat alone on the opposite side, staring at her hands. Valerie touched my shoulder, once reassuring, then stepped into the hall. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent. I've reviewed all evidence presented today. Judge Sinclair's voice carried the weight of 30 years on the bench. The guardianship petition is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, this matter is being referred to the federal prosecutor's office for criminal investigation. Clayton's face went white. Charges include elder financial abuse, identity theft, wire fraud, and willful harm to an elderly person. the judge's gaze fixed on my son. "Mr. Reed, hold the defendant." Clayton's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client should be released on his own recognizance." Bailiff Marcus Reed moved toward the defendant's table, his hand coming to rest on Clayton's shoulder. My son sat frozen for 3 heartbeats. Then he turned, looking across the courtroom one last time. Not at Celeste, who'd just destroyed his defense. Not at his attorney who'd failed to save him. At me. I met Clayton's eyes and saw something I hadn't seen in 20 years. The boy who'd stood at Navy boot camp graduation, 40 pounds lighter. Pride and fear mixed in equal measure on his young face. The son I'd raised, the man I'd trusted. Then the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, and that boy disappeared forever. The handcuffs caught the courtroom light as Bailiff Marcus Reed guided Clayton toward the exit. I remained seated watching my son shuffle across the polished floor in restraints. I waited for rage to surface, for satisfaction, for vindication. Instead, I felt nothing but the hollow weight of a father burying his child, while that child still breathed. Clayton reached the courtroom door and stopped. Reed's hand stayed firm on his shoulder, but my son turned anyway, twisting to look back across the empty gallery. Our eyes met. His face had gone red around the eyes. His lips trembled. The cocky confidence he'd worn for 3 weeks, the smirk that said he'd won, that said his father was too drugged to fight back, had shattered completely. What remained was the desperate look of someone just realizing the consequences are real. "Dad," Clayton's voice cracked on the single syllable. "Keep moving, Mr. Garrett." Reed's tone remained professional calm, the voice of a man who'd escorted 1,000 defendants to processing. I said nothing, just watched. Clayton opened his mouth again, closed it then, let Reed guide him into the hallway. The courtroom door swung shut behind them, with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. I sat in the silence that followed. The controlled anger that had kept me upright through Valerie's examination and her flawless evidence presentation began to settle. The drugs Clayton had secretly given me had completely metabolized away. What remained was a 67-year-old man who just destroyed his only child because that child had tried to destroy him first. "Wait," my voice carried across the courtroom. "Please, 1 minute." Reed appeared in the doorway, one hand still on Clayton's arm. He looked at Judge Sinclair. The judge had been gathering her papers. She paused, reading something in my expression, then nodded once. "1 minute, Mr. Garrett," then he goes to processing. I walked across the courtroom, my boots hitting the polished floor with the steady rhythm Eleanor used to say came from 30 years of Navy discipline. Reed stepped aside as I entered the marble hallway. Clayton stood 3 feet away, handcuffs gleaming under fluorescent lights. Father and son, 3 feet and a lifetime of betrayal between us. "Dad, I'm sorry." Clayton's words tumbled out fast, desperate. The pressure, the debt, I didn't know what else to do. The business failed, the creditors were calling every day I was drowning. "Stop." I kept my voice level. "Don't explain, don't justify, just listen." Clayton's mouth snapped shut. "What do you say to the child you raised when he stands in handcuffs for trying to kill you? When every memory of his childhood is true, the baseball games, the homework helped the pride at his graduation, and every action of his adulthood is betrayal, when love and justice stand on opposite sides of an unbridgeable gap. I built everything for you," I said quietly. 40 years, every decision, every deployment, every extra shift at the shipyard, it was all to give you opportunities I never had. I trusted you completely because you were my son. Clayton's face crumpled, tears tracked down his cheeks. You used that trust to drug me, to steal from me, to take my freedom. I watched him flinch with each word. You turned my own home into a prison and my daughter-in-law into a warden. You made me a prisoner in the house Eleanor and I built together. "I know," Clayton's voice broke. "I know, and Let me finish." I stepped closer. Close enough to see the red veins in his eyes, the stubble on his jaw, the boy I'd raised still visible beneath the man who'd poisoned me. "Son, I forgive you." Clayton's head snapped up, hope flashing across his face. But forgiveness doesn't mean trust. It doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean another chance. I held his gaze. "I forgive you because carrying hatred would poison me far worse than whatever you put in that tea. I forgive you because your mother would want me to find peace." I reached out and touched his shoulder, the same shoulder I'd gripped at his high school graduation, at his wedding at Eleanor's funeral. "But we're done, Clayton. You and me, this is goodbye." "Is Dad, please. Peace be with you, son." I let my hand fall. "I mean that. I hope you find it in whatever comes next." I turned toward the courthouse exit. Clayton's voice rose behind me, desperate and breaking. "Dom, please don't leave like this." I kept walking. My boots hit marble in steady rhythm. Left foot, right foot. each step carrying me farther from the son I'd loved and closer to the life Eleanor wanted me to reclaim, the life Clayton had tried to steal. Vernon. Valerie appeared beside me in the hallway, her voice quiet. Are you all right? I will be. 2 words, simple truth. Not all right now, but moving toward it with every step. Behind us, Clayton's voice echoed off marble walls. Dad, please! I didn't slow down, didn't look back. The double doors to the courthouse exit stood 50 feet ahead. October sunlight streaming through the glass panels. Freedom. Air that didn't taste like sedatives and lies. A future that belonged to me again. Valerie matched my pace, her heels clicking beside my boots. She didn't ask again, didn't push. Just walked beside me the way Eleanor would have steady presence without demands. I pushed through the courthouse doors into October sunlight. The warmth hit my face, genuine Texas heat after 3 months of climate-controlled imprisonment. Behind me, through the glass doors, I could see Clayton's silhouette, one hand raised despite the handcuffs, mouth moving, calling words I couldn't hear through the thick glass. Words I wouldn't answer, even if I could. I squared my shoulders, turned toward the granite steps leading down to the street, and started walking. Valerie's car waited at the curb, white and clean in the midday sun. Behind me, Clayton kept calling, kept reaching. I didn't look back. 3 weeks after watching Clayton led away in handcuffs, I sat in a Waco efficiency apartment I'd rented for $850 a month. 1 bedroom, kitchenette, view of the parking lot, secondhand furniture, table chair, bed lamp. Everything a man needed and nothing he didn't. This was freedom without my son. The civil court had ordered full restitution. Every stolen dollar came back with interest into a new account at a different bank. The IRS dismissed their fraud case once Valerie submitted evidence of forged signatures. My credit, my financial standing, my legal competency all restored. Everything except my family. Lester knocked on my door the second week, carrying casserole and concern. You don't have to live in this shoebox, Vernon, he said. You've got money now. Buy a house. How's your health? Better. I held out my right hand. Steady, no tremor. Headaches gone, vision cleared, appetite back. Amazing what happens when nobody's poisoning your tea. My son had been that meticulous, that patient, that cruel. As federal charges filed yet? Lester asked. Valerie called yesterday. Trial set for October 2025. I glanced at the calendar, November 2024. 11 months. Justice grinds slow. Those months passed like water through my hands. The federal trial convened October 13th, 2025, and ran 4 days. The jury deliberated for 5 hours before returning a unanimous guilty verdict. Sentencing was scheduled soon after. The federal prosecutor presented the same evidence Valerie had used a year earlier. Eleanor's letter, the bank footage, the forged signatures, the investigative files. But they added medical testimony doctors explaining how the arsenic compound administered in sublethal doses over 3 months progressively suppresses neurological function, mimicking cognitive decline and daily behavior before causing complete paralysis. 3 more months of daily exposure, they testified, would have been fatal. Clayton sat at the defendant's table in orange thinner than a year ago, hair grayer, face hollow. He'd been held without bail for 12 months, a clear flight risk given the severity of the federal charges. His attorney offered no substantive defense, just mitigation, financial desperation, business failure, family breakdown after Eleanor's death. The same excuses Clayton had tried to give me in the courthouse hallway before I'd walked away. Sentencing came. December 15th, 2025. Exactly 14 months after Judge Sinclair had ordered Clayton's arrest in civil court. I sat in the same gallery seat, watching the same son stand before a different judge. Clayton Garrett. Judge Foster's voice carried federal authority. You are sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised release. You will make full restitution for all stolen funds, legal fees, and medical expenses. The gavel fell, one sharp crack. I sat with my hands flat on the gallery bench, steady and still. The tremor from the poisoning had disappeared months ago. My vision was clear, my mind was sharp, my body was mine again. So was my money, my freedom, my future. But my family was gone. Clayton turned as the bailiff approached. Our eyes met. Dad, I said nothing. Watched him disappear through the courtroom door for the second time in 14 months. This time for a decade. I'd expected to feel victory, vindication, the satisfaction of justice served. Instead, I felt only profound emptiness, a hollow space where my son used to be, where my wife used to be, where the life I'd built for 40 years used to be. Winning the legal battle hadn't healed the loss. It had just made it official. Valerie walked beside me out of the federal courthouse into the crisp December sunlight. The cold air felt refreshing after months of dark legal battles, a dynamic ending to a year of survival. "What will you do now?" Valerie asked quietly. "It's finally over." I looked at the Houston skyline, then back at the courthouse behind us. 12 months of depositions and hearings and trials, 12 months of fighting, 12 months of being Vernon Garrett, the victim, the survivor, the man who'd destroyed his own son to save himself. The fight was over, and I had no idea who Vernon Garrett was supposed to be without it. December 2025, I carried my third and final box up 2 flights of stairs to apartment 3B. Everything I owned fit in 3 cardboard boxes and 1 duffel bag. 68 years of living reduced to what one man could carry in 2 trips. It felt exactly right. The apartment overlooked a small city park where oak trees dropped winter leaves. 2 bedrooms, morning light through the windows. I unpacked methodically clothes, mechanical tools, Eleanor's photo on the nightstand, beside the empty tin box that had held her evidence. I made coffee and sat by the window watching leaves fall. No lawyers, no depositions, no court dates, no Clayton. Just me and the life I'd fought 14 months to reclaim. I looked at Eleanor's photo. "We made it," I said to the empty room. "Not the way we planned, but we made it." I've settled into a routine. The fun takes most of my days, but when the office goes quiet, the silence in this apartment is heavy. I've spent 14 months fighting for consciousness, for evidence, for justice, for sentencing. The fight had given me purpose when grief took everything else. Now the fight is over, and I realized I didn't want a quiet retirement. The battle against Clayton had shown me something fundamental. I was strongest, not when resting, but when protecting others. Eleanor had known that before I did. That's why she'd left the evidence, not just to save me, but to transform me. "Eleanor," I said to her in the photo, "what do I do with all this now?" The answer came like she was sitting beside me. "Use it." I called Valerie. "Vernon, hi. How's the new place?" "Good. Quiet. Too quiet." I looked at the park. "I have an idea. I want to use the money Clayton stole, turn it into something Eleanor would be proud of." "I'm listening." "The Eleanor Garrett Elder Protection Fund. Free legal help for Texas seniors facing financial abuse from family members. Stop the next Clayton before he poisons the next me." Silence. Then, "Vernon, will you serve as lead counsel, pro bono in my case, paid rate when the fund grows?" "Yes, absolutely yes." "When do we start?" "Now." 2 weeks later, Valerie filed paperwork establishing the fund as a nonprofit legal defense organization. Eleanor's bracelet had become evidence. Evidence had become justice. Justice had become this fund. And this fund would become freedom for people who thought family love meant accepting abuse. The transformation felt like alchemy weaponizing pain into purpose. At our first launch event at the Waco Community Center, I stood facing 40 seniors who'd responded to flyers. Dorothy Mills, the center coordinator in her early 50s, had jumped at hosting the launch event. She stood near the door now, arms crossed, watching with the satisfied expression. The audience sat in folding chairs, faces weathered and wary. "My name is Vernon Garrett," I began. "My son poisoned me with a paralyzing sedative while stealing money my wife and I saved for 40 years. He drugged me to keep me silent, forged my signatures, and filed fraudulent guardianship papers. He would have succeeded if my wife hadn't prepared evidence before she died of cancer." The room went silent. I survived because Eleanor fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. This fund is her legacy. I gestured to Valerie beside the consultation table. "We offer free legal consultation, forensic accounting, protective orders, and court representation for Texas seniors whose families are robbing them blind." I told them about the poison tea, the steel bracelet, the trials, the sentencing. My voice never wavered. This was my story now, not shame, but ammunition. "How do we know if we qualify?" someone called. Valerie stepped forward. "If a family member controls your finances, isolates you from friends, or pressures you to sign documents, you don't understand, call us. We investigate free of charge." The audience sat motionless. Then one woman stood clapping. Another joined. Within seconds, the entire room was on their feet. I stood there watching strangers applaud the worst thing that had ever happened to me, and understood what Eleanor had been building. After the presentation, a woman approached. 74 gray hair, pulled back hands twisting a tissue. She waited while others asked questions, then stepped forward. "Mr. Garrett." Her voice shook. "You just described what my grandson is doing to me, except the poison part. At least, I don't think there's poison." I pulled out a folding chair. "Sit down here. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out." She sat, tissue shredding in her fingers. I'm Ruth Hensley. My grandson Brian moved in 6 months ago after losing his job. Started helping with bills. Now I can't access my own accounts. He says it's for my protection, but money keeps disappearing. How much? Maybe 40,000, I'm not sure. He changed all the passwords. I pulled a notebook from my pocket, the same military-issue notepad I'd carried 30 years. Started writing. Account numbers, timeline. Grandson's full name. Ruth's voice gained strength as she talked. I thought I was the only one stupid enough to let my family do this, she whispered. I reached across the table. Her hands shook, holding the coffee cup Dorothy had brought, the same tremor I'd had in the hospital when Clayton controlled everything. I steadied her hands with mine. Not anymore, I said. Helping Ruth Hensley gave me more purpose and satisfaction than Clayton's 10-year sentence ever did. Transforming from victim to advocate completed something the courtroom never could. I walked Ruth to Valerie's consultation table, where intake forms waited. Behind us, 3 more seniors stood in line, waiting to tell their stories. I glanced at Eleanor's photo on the registration table. Dorothy had asked permission to display it. Eleanor hadn't just left evidence to save one man. She'd created an advocate who could save dozens. My fingers rested on the laptop keyboard cursor, blinking on an empty screen titled Invisible No More. I had helped Ruth at the consultation table, while 3 more seniors waited behind her, each carrying stories of family betrayal that mirrored my own. Now, I sat at my apartment desk, staring at the blank page. I began typing the story I'd sworn would never define me until I realized telling it could save others. I am 68 years old. My son poisoned me with a paralyzing drug to trap me while stealing my life savings. He engineered a medical crisis, forged my signatures on bank documents, and filed fraudulent guardianship papers to make himself my legal keeper. He would have succeeded if my wife hadn't prepared evidence from her cancer bed. I wrote for 3 hours straight, the Monday evening tea, the weeks of fog and tremors, Eleanor's hidden letter, the steel graduation bracelet caught on bank security footage, Lester's intervention, the civil trial, Judge Sinclair's ruling, the federal sentencing, the Eleanor Garrett Elder Protection Fund, Ruth Hensley's shaking hands. Every detail I'd lived through now transformed into ammunition for others. At midnight, I typed the final paragraph. I survived because my wife loved me enough to fight when I couldn't fight for myself. This is for every elder who thinks they're alone. You're not. And there are people ready to help, starting with the Eleanor Garrett Elder Protection Fund. I added contact information, Valerie's office number, the fund's email address, the community center where we held consultations. My cursor hovered over the publish button. This wasn't about revenge against Clayton or vindication for myself. This was about making thousands of invisible abused elders feel seen and heard. About turning my private hell into their public lifeline. Eleanor. I said to her photo on my desk, "This one's for you." I clicked publish. 48 hours later, the blog post had 3,000 shares across Texas senior networks. My inbox flooded 72 messages from elders recognizing their own stories and mine. I read every single message, replied to each one personally. From San Antonio. My daughter is doing this exact thing, controls my checkbook, monitors my phone calls, tells me I'm too confused to manage my own life. I thought I was going crazy. My reply, "You're not crazy, you're being abused. Financial control plus isolation equals elder abuse. Here's who can help." I included Valerie's direct number. From Dallas. "Thank you for making me feel less alone. I'm 81 years old and thought no one would believe me if I said my grandson was stealing from me." My reply, "I believe you, so will the Eleanor Garrett Fund? Call this number tomorrow. Tell them Vernon sent you." From Austin. "Your wife saved you from beyond the grave. Mine just died last month. I wish she'd left me a map like Eleanor left you." My reply, "She did. You're reading it right now. This blog post is your map. Follow it. If you're reading this and recognizing your own story, your child, your grandchild, your caregiver, taking what isn't theirs, you are not invisible. You are not alone. The silence they've wrapped around you isn't protection. It's control. And you can break it the same way I did. One phone call, one conversation, one refusal to disappear. December 20th, 2025. 2 p.m. I drove to my old Waco workshop on Industrial Boulevard. I'd called ahead. The Lieutenant Marcus Flynn, a machinist in his 30s, had agreed to let me visit. He met me at the door, wiping oil from his hands with a red rag. "Mr. Garrett, come in. Take your time. The place has good energy." I stepped into the workshop and the smell hit me. First machine oil, hot metal, the particular scent of steel being shaped under pressure. 20 years of memories lived in these walls. I'd built carburetors at that workbench. forged custom brackets at that table, taught my son metalwork in this exact space. I walked to the forging table, ran my hand across the scarred steel surface. It's cold now, no fire burning beneath it. Taught my son to forge steel at this table, I said to Marcus, who stood respectfully near the door. Thought I was teaching him to build things. Marcus nodded, saying nothing. Good instinct. I pressed my palm flat against the table. Turns out he learned to forge signatures instead. I'd given him the idea without knowing it. Steel doesn't break when you forge it. It transforms. Heat and pressure don't destroy. They reveal what was always there beneath the surface. Clayton's heat and pressure hadn't destroyed me. They had revealed the advocate Eleanor knew I could become. I stood at the forging table, where I had taught my son to shape metal, where I had accidentally taught him to weaponize trust, and felt no anger, no resentment about Eleanor's death, no bitterness about Clayton's betrayal. Just clarity, the kind that comes only to people transformed by fire. I placed my calloused palm on the cold steel one last time. I forgive you, son, I said to the empty air, but I don't need you anymore. I walked toward the exit. Marcus held the door. Thank you, I told him. Anytime, Mr. Garrett. You built something good here. I can feel it. I stepped into the December sun, warm on my face despite the winter date. Texas heat that never quite disappeared, even when calendars said it should. I closed the workshop door behind me and understood the final truth I gave Clayton life once 42 years ago in a Houston hospital. And I took back my own life later in a courtroom with Eleanor's evidence and my refusal to disappear. No one can erase you if you refuse to vanish. I walked to my truck. Eleanor's photo sat on the passenger seat where I'd placed it that morning, her face young and smiling, frozen before cancer, before Clayton, before everything went dark. Eleanor, I said, climbing into the driver's seat. We made it. Different than we planned, but we made it. My phone buzzed. Another message. Another Texas senior who'd read Invisible No More and finally felt seen. I answered it. I always will. 68 years old, still here, still fighting, still visible. And to you listening to my story, remember this, no one can erase you if you refuse to disappear. I spent 67 years trusting without question. I gave my son everything, my knowledge, my home, my savings. When Eleanor warned me about Clayton's debts, about how he circled our finances like a predator, I defended him. He's our son, I told her. Family doesn't do that to family. I was wrong. My refusal to see the truth nearly cost my life. If you're facing family betrayal right now, please don't make my mistake. Don't ignore the warning signs because you think blood means loyalty. Financial abuse is still abuse. Isolation is still control. And trust without accountability is just permission for someone to destroy you. I believe God put Eleanor in my life, not just to love me, but to save me when I wouldn't save myself. She fought from her deathbed to protect me. That's the kind of family story worth telling, not the one where my son poisoned me, but the one where my wife's love outlasted death itself. I'd love to hear from you. Have you experienced family betrayal? Or do you know someone trapped in a situation like mine? Leave a comment below. Share this family story with anyone who needs to hear it. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step to freedom. And if you believe stories like mine matter, please subscribe to Revenge Dad. Together, we make sure no elder becomes invisible. Thank you for staying until the very end of this family story. Your time means everything to me. One last note. While this narrative includes fictionalized elements for storytelling and reflection, the core lesson about recognizing family betrayal and protecting yourself remains real. May you never need this knowledge, but may you have it if you do.